In labor before my Sill's wedding, Mill locked me in a bathroom to avoid stealing the spotlight. I woke in the hospital. 2 weeks ago, Rick, 30 million, and I, 29 feet, had a daughter May. We are certainly thrilled to have our first child. As we get used to being new parents, things have been hectic. We're both having a difficult shift, but we're trying our hardest. Unfortunately, given what transpired on the day of May's birth, we are unable to offer much assistance. I don't think I will ever be able to forget it because it was one of the most painful events in my life. The overwhelming terror I experienced that day hasn't been replaced, not even by the happiness of May's arrival. If it weren't for my husband's prompt action, I genuinely think I would have passed away. I'm conflicted despite the terrible incident. Part of me feels that since it includes family, we need to be kinder to them, particularly as May is the family's eldest child. But because hormones and newborn responsibilities are impairing my judgment, I've turned to Reddit for support. Please be patient with me. There are a lot of characters in this story. The two younger sisters of Rick are Emma, 24F, and Anna, 28F. Both of them and I have always gotten along well, so I don't believe there is any hostility between us. Since each of us is preoccupied with our own lives and occupations, we are not particularly close. Even though Emma lives in a different city, we make an effort to communicate via phone or text whenever possible. My mother-in-law Rachel, 53F, is another significant character in this tale. I get along well with Emma and Anna, but Rachel and I don't get along. We don't agree, and I genuinely believe she has problems with everyone, not just me. Rachel has an obsession with control. Her responses range from criticism and pouting to full-blown tantrums with tears because she wants things to happen her way. Because she reared them alone after their father left them, her children, including Rick, usually abide by her desires. They make an effort to ease their own and her burdens. Rick allows me to keep my distance and handle his mother any way I see fit because he knows she may be challenging. I've always attempted to leave things be, even though Rachel can be somewhat controlling. I avoid her since she doesn't like me. Up until a few days ago, when everything went awry, this arrangement worked. Anna was getting married the day May was born. Her husband, Jonah, 30 million, is actually Rick's friend, and the wedding was lovely. About a year ago, he proposed to her, and I agreed to be a bridesmaid when Anna asked me to. I had to ask Anna to designate someone else as her maid of honor after Rick and I learned I was expecting. I was aware that I couldn't handle the obligations. This was just 6 months before the wedding and roughly 6 months after her proposal. I was 3 months pregnant at the time. Before informing Anna, I was really anxious. I was afraid that our connection would become permanently strained. I was relieved that didn't occur. When I told Anna the news, she was ecstatic. She even briefly forgot about getting married. Obviously, "I'll be taking care of you," she said when I told her that I couldn't perform the duties of maid of honor. She even thought about moving the wedding date so I wouldn't miss it, but that didn't work out in the end. Both sisters continued to work on getting ready for the wedding, with Emma filling in as maid of honor. In spite of this, they found time to help me during my really difficult pregnancy. Anna always stood by me without complaining, but I felt bad for missing her on such a significant day. Rachel, my mother-in-law, was the only one who appeared distressed. The wedding preparations were somewhat disrupted, and I believe she was irritated that I could no longer serve as the maid of honor. Rachel began to act hostilely toward me, while Anna was totally cool with my pregnancy and my absence from bridal chores. It was subtly persistent. I chose to dismiss it, assuming it was just her wedding stress or my hormones. The wedding day came 2 weeks ago. By that time, my feet were swollen, my abdomen was enormous, and I was severely pregnant. Anna wanted me there, so even though I was tired and felt like I could faint, I wanted to go. In order to avoid detracting from her special day, I had asked her in advance if my presence would pose any problems. I even had the thought that she was offended. Anna informed me that she only wanted her family to be there to support her and that she didn't care about fame or attention. She urged me to go and not be concerned about any drama. I trusted Anna because I knew how direct she was, and I felt obligated to support her despite my physical discomfort. I won't lie, there were a lot of whispers and murmurs regarding my presence on Anna's wedding day. I knew Anna was glad I was there, so I tried my best to ignore them. That was all I cared about at the time. But Rachel didn't talk to me very often. The whole time she scowled at me. I was too uneasy to pay any attention. I left her alone because I lacked the energy to confront her or figure out why she was acting in such a passive-aggressive manner. I wasn't going to react, so she could glare all she wanted. Then came the major incident, which really startled me and everyone else. I began to feel nervous just before the ceremony started. After meeting Anna, I went upstairs in the hopes of feeling better before going back. I had no idea that Rachel had been following me. I went to the bathroom because I felt weird and sweaty. My water suddenly burst. It was a real deluge. Immediately, panic struck. My baby had arrived at the worst possible time, despite the fact that I love her more than anything. I was attempting to think clearly while crouched in agony when Rachel suddenly materialized in front of me. We had to get to the hospital, so I ordered her to grab my phone and call Rick right away. Rachel escorted me to the restroom and took a seat for me. I trusted her to act appropriately, so I gave her my phone. She lost it at that point. Because she didn't want me to steal Anna's spotlight, Rachel said she would make sure Rick arrived after the ceremony. Shocked, I questioned if she was crazy and told her that I couldn't endure this for an hour. She took the phone with her and locked me in the bathroom when I tried to get it back. There I was, sitting on a toilet in a restroom, in labor, very pregnant, without a spouse or phone. I managed to avoid having a full-blown panic attack. What might have happened if I had is unknown to me. I stood up and walked to the door, yelling for assistance and hammering on it. However, nobody heard me because everyone was sitting for the wedding and the restroom was on the first level. I yelled until I could no longer be heard, but nobody arrived. At that point, I genuinely believed that I would pass away and that my child would follow me in death. I finally passed asleep, exhausted, sweating profusely, and without a voice. I don't recall anything else after that. Hours later, I awoke in the hospital. Rick was crying beside me. It took me a moment to figure out where I was and what was going on. I expected the worst when I saw Rick crying, and everything that had happened to me before, Rachel locking me in the bathroom and my calls for assistance, came flooding back. I believed May had not arrived. When Rick saw I was awake, he let out a breath of relief and began sobbing in my arms. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach and felt overpowered. The nurse then entered carrying a baby girl. I let out a sigh of comfort. There will never be a better moment than the first time I held my baby. Since I didn't have the energy to digest everything at that point, I was thankful that Rick didn't give me any details. I could hear some noise outside the hospital room, though. Rick explained that his mother was outside and wanted to come in to see her granddaughter when I asked him what was happening. I filled him in on everything, including Rachel's actions and how she needlessly put our daughter in risk. Furthermore, I made it plain that I would never permit her to get close to my daughter. She was dead to me. Rick said he already knew everything and nodded. Rachel had sobbed and told him everything when he discovered me in that way. I informed him that I would not forgive her because of her breakdown. Rick chuckled and declared that Rachel was dead to him as well from this moment on. He declared that he would go to court to make sure she was punished and that he intended to prosecute her with endangering her life. I felt as though a burden had been removed when I heard that. Rick and his brothers all love his mother, so I know that he does, but I wasn't in the mood to forgive her after what she had done, which might have cost me and May our lives. Our marriage would have been finished if Rick had sided with his mother instead of me. After that, there would have been no turning back. Given everything she had given up to raise them, I secretly feared he might support her. However, Rick defended me, and I am very appreciative. If it's possible, it increased my love for him. I inquired about Rick's wedding experience. "It's okay," he answered, adding that Anna and Emma were waiting for his call to come see us. He laughed and assured me not to worry when I inquired if Anna was upset. When Anna said that May's birth was the greatest present she could have gotten on her wedding day, she was ecstatic and beaming with pride. I cried when I heard that, and I told Rick to call them right away. Jonah, Emma, and Anna arrived to the hospital in a matter of minutes. The finest aspect? Jonah and Anna were still dressed for their wedding. There was no way Anna was going to miss the opportunity to take a wedding photo with her niece. I began to cry. It was a very touching moment. I apologized to Anna for spoiling her day after the photo. She gave me a big hug and told me that I was mistaken and that I had brightened her day. After that, I informed Anna about Rachel's actions since we made the pregnancy public. The only thing I did wrong, according to Anna, was not notifying them sooner. She was enraged. She thought that Rachel's drama could have been avoided. Emma added that any amount of trouble was okay as long as I was safe after I clarified that I didn't want to start any. My eyes still well up with tears as I type this. I realized then that they actually loved me as a member of their family, not simply Rick's wife. One of the most amazing people I've ever met is Anna. She's safe, kind, and incredibly happy. Understandably, she has achieved great success in life. How Rachel becomes so different from her kids is beyond me. It seems as though they chose to act in the exact opposite way after witnessing her actions. It's strange, but I no longer give a damn. The moment was lovely. Rachel, meanwhile, remained outside. On the walk-in, Anna assured her that she would personally see to it that Rick and I filed charges. I didn't want Rachel close to me, but she still wanted to come in to meet May. According to Anna, we must protect ourselves from Rachel. She also expressed regret, believing she had not done enough to clarify that she had no issue with my pregnancy or to allay her mother's overly protective tendencies. Anna thought that perhaps the incident could have been prevented if she had been more outspoken. I informed Anna that she was not at fault and that she had made me feel protected. Rick was outside conversing with Rachel the entire time. Rick shared his conversation with Rachel with me after I was released from the hospital and brought May home a few days later. He told her that nothing would alter his decision and that he would be filing charges. He also informed her that she was not regarded as May's grandma in any way and would never be permitted to be a part of her life. For a perceived offense that didn't even bother her, Rachel's actions had put our unborn kid and my life in risk. Additionally, Rick stated that he would drastically cut back on the financial assistance that Rachel had been receiving from him and Emma. Rachel broke down in tears at that time, saying she didn't deserve this treatment because she had slaved away her whole life for her kids. Rick strongly asserted that her acts did not provide her authority over their life, even though he respected the sacrifices she had made. He acknowledged that he had been overlooking or justifying her actions for years, but that was no longer the case with May and me. Given that Anna had never objected to my attending her wedding, Rachel had gone too far and demonstrated that she was dangerous to be around. After that, Rachel attempted to defend her behavior by claiming that she was attempting to keep Anna safe and didn't want me stealing the spotlight. However, Anna heard this and scolded Rachel, stating unequivocally that she had never felt that way. We are moving on with the lawsuit, but Rick is taking care of it because I can't handle the extra stress of caring for a newborn. Rick has stated unequivocally that none of the siblings are interested in continuing to be friends with Rachel. Emma only talks to her when it's absolutely necessary, and Anna has shut her off totally. Naturally, Rick and I are also no contact. Rachel probably didn't expect this backlash. As perverse as that seems, it's possible that she truly believed she was defending Anna. I'm not justifying her in the slightest, but I feel sorry for her since things went so wrong. I'm wondering now if we ought to discuss it with her. I feel awful and wrong about it, but perhaps I'm not thinking straight. I'm aware that Rick will become irate if I bring this up to him. He can't even look at Rachel at the moment since he is so angry with her. I didn't think this rift would be this deep, but here we are. First update, well, there is no possibility of reconciliation, never again. Being a new mother has kept me quite busy, which is why I haven't posted in a while. I haven't had much time for anything else because I've been so busy taking care of myself and my daughter. The good news is that we are all very enthusiastic about May's impending 8-week birthday. Rick and I have benefited much from the assistance of Anna and Jonah. Emma contacts us nearly every day, but she had to go back to work. Everyone's life are brightened by May, and her photos are all over our group chat. Rachel has not been contacted. Since we already have too much on our plate and filing charges would be pointless, I persuaded Rick not to do so. Since none of us has the energy to handle the matter at this time, Rick reluctantly consented. Rachel seemed appreciative when we informed her of this choice last week. I use the word appeared, because the woman is genuinely insane, and she soon revealed her true nature to everyone. Rick and I got up at around 1 a.m. last week. To a booming knock on the door. Rick went to open the door, but I fled and hid with May because I assumed it was a robbery. Although I could hear shouting, I was afraid to venture out for fear of waking May. My mother-in-law, Rachel, was the one who did it. According to Rick, she was acting irrationally, yelling that we couldn't keep her away and that she needed to see May. She finally backed off after Rick threatened to call the police. She had been attempting to enter the residence by force. We thought that something might be wrong with her and that everyone needed to know, so we contacted Emma and Anna right once. But our worry didn't last long. Rachel texted us unsettlingly the following day. She began by saying that we were punishing her for being a mother by denying her access to May, calling us nasty and horrid. The text soon became erratic and theatrical. She discussed the challenges of parenting 3 children and how she had to put one child's needs ahead of another at all times. She used the excuse that she didn't want May to ruin Anna's wedding to defend her actions on May's birthday. Rachel deliberately disregarded the fact that Anna had constantly emphasized that she had no issue with the pregnancy and wedding taking place at the same time, and that May was actually a fetus at the time. I initially made an effort to comprehend her viewpoint. Then, though, her text became more sinister. Rachel said that she was concerned that her children would no longer value her as much now that May was in our lives. She said that she had thought Anna would be angry about the pregnancy because, as she put it, that's what a normal woman would feel. However, she didn't like it when she saw us all thrilled about the wedding and the pregnancy. She wanted us to be envious and competitive instead of pleased that we were happy for each other. Rachel continued by saying that she felt devalued because May had replaced her as her children's unifying factor. She also said that she had anticipated Anna would snap at her for drawing attention away from the wedding because of May's birth. Rachel felt supplanted when it didn't occur and May was the only topic of conversation. I was no longer able to read by this time. Telling Rick that she was insane and dangerous for all of us, I requested him to ban her number. Since reading those texts, I've been suffering from a persistent headache. How a 50-year-old woman could compete with a 7-week-old infant is beyond me. I don't get it, and to be honest, I'm done attempting to figure out why she does it. Both Emma and Anna were similarly horrified when we shared Rachel's mails to them. They hypothesized that she might be experiencing a manic episode. Emma even volunteered to fly down and have a facility evaluate Rachel. I acknowledged that it was a smart concept, but I made it plain that I no longer wanted to interact with Rachel. Her actions were too risky and unpredictable. Second update, Rachel is currently the subject of a restraining order. We are exercising caution even though she hasn't tried anything since the late-night event. Emma carried out her plan, consulted a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and had Rachel tested. Although Rachel's behavior had no underlying medical cause, she was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. The next course of action recommended by the specialists was therapy. Emma made the decision to cut all communication with Rachel following this disclosure. She stated that she would be happy to assist if Rachel had a medical condition, but Emma can no longer put up with her now that it is obvious that her acts are motivated by hatred. I share the sentiment and fully comprehend it. If Rachel's behavior had been the result of a real mental illness, I might have felt some pity for her. But we can't make amends with her now that we know this is just who she is. The purpose of the restraining order is to protect Rick, May, and myself. Rachel has shown herself to be unsafe on 2 occasions, and her particular animosity against May makes her much more hazardous. We cannot compromise on keeping her away from our family. This, I believe, will be my last update. I hope I never have to talk about this whole experience again. Mom moved her friend and kids into my room, so I left to pay the bills at home, and now she's begging me to come back. Although living at home at the age of 23 wasn't exactly what I had planned for my life, it worked out for the most part. I wasn't simply lounging around playing video games and eating snacks. I was paying my rent, my mom's phone bill, and my power bill. I had my own place, home-cooked meals, and was able to concentrate on my freelance job without having to worry about large bills. I had even converted my room into a small studio for my content creation gigs, which I hoped would gain popularity soon. All in all, the arrangement was very fantastic. Everything was good until Kelly, my mom's best friend, moved in with her 2 children. I wasn't happy about it, but I could understand why. Kelly was going through a difficult divorce, and her husband was a total jerk, according to my mom, so they needed a place to stay, and our house was the best choice. They stayed in the guest room at first, and it wasn't a big deal. Sure, the kids were a little noisy, but I just closed my door and put on my headphones. I assumed it would only be temporary, only a few weeks until Kelly got back on her feet. I assumed that was the arrangement and didn't think much about it, but that quickly changed. The guest room wasn't very large, but it was sufficient for Kelly and her children to stay in for a time. I couldn't believe what I saw when I walked in one day after running some errands and saw something strange right away. My door was open and I could hear children laughing inside. My studio setup, including my pricey microphone, lighting, and camera, was pushed into a corner as if it didn't matter. Kelly's kids were running around like they owned the place. My desk chair was shifted, my bed was covered in toys, and one of the kids was on my computer. I was so shocked that I probably screamed, "What the hell is going on?" louder than I should have. "Calm your tits," my mother replied. "It's not a big deal. The kids needed more space, and your room is the biggest? It's only fair." My mother walked in and began berating me as if I was the one who was out of line. Fair? The room for which I was paying rent? She dismissed me as though I were being silly when I informed her that I wanted them out of my room right away, saying, "You're being selfish. They need to be comfortable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about comfort, it was about respect. My room wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a place where I worked. I had spent more than $3,000 on my studio setup, so I couldn't just put it in a corner and forget about it. My mother was not amenable to my explanations, saying, "They're just kids, they want to play on your computer, stop making such a fuss." I quickly put an end to that notion, saying, "They are not touching my equipment in any way, and if they do, I'm in serious trouble." Kelly then said, "Oh, come on. They're just curious, and you can't blame them. Maybe if you weren't so stiff, they'd listen to you." I was shocked. I wasn't uptight, I was just trying to protect the things I had worked so hard to acquire. I told Kelly bluntly that her children couldn't touch my belongings and that I would hold her accountable if they did. Kelly called me selfish, and my mother agreed. All of a sudden, I was the villain in my own house. The home became uncomfortable after that initial outburst, and I was shocked that my mom and Kelly were against me, especially because I was the one who was paying the rent. However, I assumed that after they calmed down, they would see how absurd this was. I tried to talk to my mom again the following day, explaining how important my studio equipment was to me both financially and professionally. Freelancing isn't just a pastime, it's my job, and I couldn't function without it, and it would take months or maybe years to replace it. I'm not trying to be rude, but this is unfair, Mom. You gave it away without even asking me, and I'm paying the rent for that room. You're being dramatic. It's my house, and I decide what happens in it, she retorted. Your house? I pay rent. I'm contributing here, not just squatting for free, I exclaimed in shock. The kids need space. Your brother's room is too small, and your sister's room is full of her things. Besides, your room has all that fancy stuff, and they like it better. She shrugged as if it didn't matter. My sister's room was nearly as large as mine, and to be honest, she hardly used it because she was always out with her friends, but my mother wouldn't even entertain the possibility that my siblings, both of whom were 15, had perfectly good rooms. My brother's was smaller, but it was still large enough for 2 children. She claimed that the kids adore your room since it is cooler and that all of your glitzy devices add to their enjoyment. Fun? This wasn't about having fun. My room served as a place where I lived, worked, and unwinded, not as a play area for Kelly's children. What, are you going to replace anything if they break it? Because I can't afford to, I asked her. Oh, stop being so paranoid. They're kids, not monsters. If you just let them play, they'd probably leave your stuff alone, Kelly added at that point. Letting them play on my $3,000 setup? Are you serious? No way, I yelled. You're being selfish. This is a difficult time for us, and you're making it all about you, said Kelly, rolling her eyes. When I finally had enough, I turned to my mother and told her, I have to move my stuff out if they're staying in my room. I can't risk them damaging it. Where are you going to put it? There's no space anywhere else, she asked, laughing, really laughing. I raised my voice and said, so I'm just supposed to let them trash my stuff? How is that fair? Life is unfair. You're an adult, you should be able to handle a little inconvenience, my mother said, shaking her head. A minor annoyance? No, it was disrespectful to be evicted from my own room. I had paid rent for that space, and now I was not only unable to use it, but I was also prohibited from entering my room, which my mother claimed was their space now, and that I had no right to enter. I spent the next few days attempting to avoid being at home as much as possible, hanging out at coffee shops, and working on my laptop, but it wasn't the same without my studio setup. I was falling behind on deadlines, my productivity plummeted, and my stress levels were through the sky. Look, I replied. I'll work out a deal. Let me move my setup into the guest room and they stay in my room. That way, I can continue working and they can have the space they need. This was my final attempt to talk sense into my mother's head. No, you'll just have to wait until Kelly gets back on her feet. The guest room is too small for all your stuff, she said without even considering it. How long will that take? I questioned impatiently. As long as it takes, she shrugged, adding, you don't get to set deadlines for other people's struggles. I wanted to help Kelly and her children because I knew they were going through a difficult time, but this wasn't helping. It was enabling. Kelly wasn't paying anything to stay with us, and now I was essentially being forced out of my own life to make room for them. I couldn't believe this was happening. I heard Kelly moaning about me later that night in the kitchen, calling me immature and selfish, saying, he doesn't even understand how hard this is for us. He's just being a brat. He's always been stubborn. He'll get over it, my mother concurred. That was the last straw. I knew they didn't give a damn about me or my predicament. I was simply a paycheck to my mom and a barrier to Kelly and her children. They wouldn't listen, and they wouldn't change. Despite the odd turmoil, I loved living at home, it was affordable, and I got along with my brothers. However, I couldn't continue to live somewhere where I wasn't appreciated, so I started looking for rooms to rent the following day. After feeling like a stranger in my own house for days, I finally had enough and realized that respect was more important than the room anymore. I was trying to establish a future for myself, pay my bills, and pay my rent, but neither my mom nor Kelly seemed to care. They had decided that my needs came first, and I was sick of it. I thought that if I could show my mom how serious I was, she would finally listen. One evening, when it was just the two of us and my siblings were upstairs and Kelly was putting her kids to bed, I sat my mom down in the living room. Mom, I said calmly at the beginning, We need to talk. She looked at me wearily and said, "What now?" I said, "I can't continue to live this way. You gave it away without asking, and it's unfair. I've been paying rent for that room, and now I can't even use it. We've been through this. It's temporary. Kelly and the kids are going through a hard time. You're young, and you can adapt," she said, leaning back on the couch with a sigh. "You didn't ask me, you just decided that my room wasn't mine anymore, and now I can't even work since everything I own is packed up or pushed into a corner." "That's not the point," I shot back. "It's about respect, not about adjusting." She waved me away and remarked, "You're being dramatic. This is my house, and I get to decide what happens in it." It seemed like a slap in the face each time she uttered that line. I remarked, "If this is your house, then why am I paying rent? Perhaps I shouldn't be paying anything at all if you're going to treat me like a guest." "Don't you dare pull that. You know I need your help with the bills," she said, her eyes narrowing. I yelled, "That's not how this works. You can't take my money every month and then turn around and say I have no say. Then treat me like I matter. What do you want me to do? Throw Kelly and her kids out on the street?" "They have nowhere else to go," she said, giving me a crazy eyes look. But there are other options. They could move into one of my siblings' rooms or stay in the guest room. Hell, you could even rotate rooms so everyone takes turns sharing the space. But taking my room and locking me out? That's not okay," I said, shaking my head. "Your room was the best option," my mother said, crossing her arms. "Your brother and sister are too young to share their rooms, and the guest room is too small for 3 people. "No," I shot back. "It was the simplest solution. You dumped it on me because you didn't want to handle the hassle." The last word. "I'll make this simple," I said, staring her in the eye. "Either Kelly and the kids move out of my room, or I move out of the house. Those are your options." My irritation bubbled over at that moment. Surprised, she blinked. "Don't be crazy. Where would you even go?" she said. I informed her, "If you don't respect me or the fact that I'm paying to live here, then I'll find somewhere else to live." I had already begun looking for rooms to rent. "You're bluffing. You can't afford to move out," she sneered. "Try me," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. My mom didn't take me seriously, which only strengthened my resolve, so I spent every free moment looking through rental listings, messaging landlords, and figuring out my budget. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I could make it work if I cut back on non-essentials. The next few days were stressful. I didn't bring up the ultimatum again, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. At home, however, things deteriorated. Kelly's children had transformed my room into their own playground, and I was not even permitted to enter without someone yelling. One day, I attempted to get some books and a set of headphones that I had left behind, but Kelly stopped me. With her fists on her hips, she stood in the doorway and demanded, "What are you doing in here?" I tried to seem calm as I said, "I need my stuff." "This is their room now, so you can't just walk in whenever you want," she said, shaking her head. I was dumbfounded as I looked at her and said, "Are you serious? This is my room." "Not anymore," she stated in a cold tone. "You have to respect their personal space." With clenched teeth I answered, "I'm paying rent for this room, so I'll gather my belongings and go, but don't tell me to respect their space when no one respects mine." The irony almost made me giggle. My mom wasn't going to support me, and Kelly wasn't going to change, so I knew that if I wanted things to improve, I would have to take matters into my own hands. She muttered something under her breath and left, but the damage was already done. Relocating the landlord was friendly, the room was clean enough, and most importantly, I could set up my studio without worrying about kids touching my equipment. I found a room for rent a week after the ultimatum, which was within my budget. It was a small space in an older building, but it was mine. When I signed the lease, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness because I had to put myself first, even if it meant leaving behind the house I'd grown up in. I didn't tell my mom right away because I wanted to make sure everything was finalized before I dropped the bombshell. After I signed the lease for my new place, I knew I had to act quickly because if I gave my mom too much notice, she would find a way to make the move even more difficult. I carefully planned it out and told a few close friends about it, and 2 of them agreed to help me pack and move my belongings. One of them even offered to record everything on their phone, just in case things got ugly. I knew it would be difficult, especially with my mom and Kelly breathing down my neck, but I didn't care anymore. I wanted to give my mom one last chance to make amends, so I sat down with her the night before the move. "Mom," I began calmly. "I'm moving out tomorrow and I found a place to rent." Startled, she raised her head from her phone and said, "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I replied, nodding. You didn't give me a lot of options. You're overreacting. This whole thing is temporary. You're leaving over nothing, she said, rolling her eyes. I firmly stated, it's not nothing. You treated me like a disposable object, gave away my room, locked me out, and told me I had no say in the matter. You know I need your rent money to keep this house running. If you leave, how am I supposed to pay the bills? She groaned as if I were wearing her out. You made it obvious that this isn't my house. You stated that it's your house, your rules. Well, if that's the case, then I don't have to stay here, I answered, pushing off a twinge of remorse. So you're just going to leave us high and dry? She glared at me. I shrugged and said, I don't owe you anything. You can ask Kelly, or her husband, since they're still married, to start paying the rent. I decided to leave after she gave me a chilly glance and returned to her phone without saying anything else. My friends arrived early the following day with a rented van and a few cars, and we were prepared to finish everything as soon as possible. I had previously packed the majority of my belongings into boxes, but I still needed to move my studio setup out of my old room. The kids were running around the living room, and Kelly was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee when we arrived at the house. She looked at me suspiciously as soon as I entered. She narrowed her eyes and questioned, "What's going on?" "I'm leaving," I said plainly. "Really? You're leaving because of this?" "That's pathetic," she said, raising her eyebrows. Ignoring her, I went upstairs to my room, or what had been my room, and when I opened the door, I was nearly sickened by what I saw. My desk was cluttered with random items. My computer, microphone, and camera were crammed into a corner, and they appeared to have been neglected for weeks. "Start recording," I said, turning to one of my buddies. As I gently started packing away my equipment, he took out his phone and started shooting, and Kelly must have recognized what was going on because she walked upstairs and began to yell. "This is their room now, so you can't just walk in here and start taking stuff," she yelled. "It's my stuff, Kelly. I paid for it, and I'm taking it with me," I said, turning to face her while maintaining my composure. "You're being ridiculous. You're throwing a tantrum over a couple of kids needing space," she said, crossing her arms. "This isn't a tantrum," I responded steadily. "This is me defending myself. You and my mother have treated me as though I'm unimportant, and I'm over it." My mom came upstairs to see what was going on, and when she saw the empty room, she flipped out. She started screaming again, but I ignored her and continued packing, and my friends helped me load everything into the van while one of them continued to film, in case Kelly or my mom tried to pull something. She said, her voice trembling with rage, "You're really leaving us just because you didn't get your way?" I gave her a direct look and said, "I'm leaving because you didn't respect me. You made it clear that I'm not a priority here, so I'm making myself a priority. I paid rent for this room, and you gave it away without even asking." "Don't, I've made my decision," I said, holding up a hand as she opened her lips to disagree. Kelly stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, gazing at me as I carried the last box out to the van. "Good luck out there," she murmured cynically, "because when things get tough, you'll realize how selfish you've been." I simply got into the van and drove off with my companions without even bothering to answer. My mom was outraged and accused me of being selfish and thoughtless for leaving her in a difficult situation, saying that I was quitting the family and leaving her to handle the bills alone. That night, after I had moved into my new house and begun unpacking, my phone exploded with texts from her. One text said, "I can't believe you'd do this to me after everything I've done for you. You've always been so selfish." She had made her decisions, and now I was making mine, so I typed up a response but erased it since I didn't owe her an explanation. As soon as I moved into my new home, I was relieved that there would be no more arguments, disrespect, or, most importantly, that I didn't matter. My new room was smaller, and the building wasn't exactly the best, but it was quiet, and it was mine. I started by unpacking my studio gear and carefully arranging it in my room's corner. I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in weeks. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Trips of guilt. The following morning, my mom began bombarding my phone with messages, asking whether I had paid the rent for the month. When I told her that I wasn't paying because I had moved out, she became furious. She texted, "You owe me for the remainder of this month, and you haven't even reached the 25th yet." I rolled my eyes and said, "No, I don't. You can ask Kelly to pay the rent because I'm not living there anymore. Kelly doesn't have money to pay rent. You know that. You're leaving me to handle everything on my own, and I can't afford it," she said almost immediately. I replied by text, "That's not my problem. You stated clearly that it's your house and your rules. Now it's your bills and your responsibility." That response infuriated her, and she began accusing me of being ungrateful, selfish, and immature, saying that my departure was tearing the family apart. Initially, the guilt began to seep in, but I reminded myself of why I had left in the first place. My mom had treated me like a throwaway object, so why should I feel guilty about prioritizing myself? I had always contributed financially, and I knew my efforts had made a significant impact. My mom sent me lengthy, meandering texts about how I was ruining things the following week, and the guilt trips escalated into fury. Everyone in the family is asking why you left, and I don't know what to tell them. One text said, "It was amazing how much better I felt without all the chaos and negativity weighing me down, so I didn't bother responding because I knew that anything I said would only make things worse. Instead, I concentrated on getting settled in my new home, catching up on work, and getting my studio back up and running." My sister contacted me unexpectedly a few days later, and since I hadn't heard from her since I moved out, I assumed she wanted to check in. However, as soon as I answered, I knew she had other plans. She skipped the small conversation and exclaimed, "Mom is really upset. She says you're not paying rent this month, and now she's freaking out about the bills." I said calmly, "I'm not living there anymore. Why should I pay rent for a place I'm not living in?" My sister countered, "But you know she can't afford it without you. Why stop now? You've always helped out." I told her straight out. Because she didn't respect me. She gave away my room, locked me out, and treated me like I didn't matter. I'm enough of being taken advantage of. It's not that easy. Mom is just trying to help, and Kelly is going through a lot, my sister groaned. I replied, "I understand that, but why does assisting Kelly mean that I'm being taken advantage of? I paid the rent for that room, so I had every right to keep it." My sister added pathetically, "She's just stressed out and didn't mean to screw you over." I retorted, "So am I, but nobody gave a damn when I was being forced out of my own room." I could tell she was stuck in the middle, but I wasn't going to allow her shame me into changing my opinion, so I hung up after we spoke for a few more minutes, largely about her school-related issues. A final stunt, my mother began to cut off her texts as the days passed. I believe she understood I wouldn't back down, but she did one more thing that made me glad I had left. I received a text message one morning saying, "Hey, I heard about the drama with your mom. Are you okay?" From a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. I asked them what they were talking about, confused, and they sent me a screenshot of one of my mom's Facebook posts. She portrayed me as the bad guy in it, saying that I had abandoned her and the family when they were in need, omitting the part where she gave away my room, of course, and making it seem as though I had departed out of pure resentment. I was incensed. Arguing with me in private was one thing, but sharing our private problems on the internet? That was too much. I didn't reply to the post because I thought it wasn't worth the trouble. If she had to play the victim, then let her. I knew the truth, and so did the people who really mattered. My mom still texts me occasionally, but I limit the conversation to neutral subjects and keep it brief. I've learned to set boundaries and am no longer allowing her to guilt trip me. Now, a month later, I'm completely settled in my new place, my work is back on track, my stress levels are significantly lower, and I'm finally beginning to feel like myself again. If my mom couldn't give me the respect I deserve, I had to find it somewhere. Moving out was the best thing I could have done for myself, and I'm not looking back. Do I feel awful about leaving? Sometimes. Yes, it's terrible that things had to end this way, but I don't regret my choice. My family didn't invite me to the reunion, so I showed up unannounced, shared my engagement news, and finally took a stand for myself. I am the youngest of 3 siblings and I am 28 years old. As a child, it was clear that I was the odd one out. There was always an obvious favorite, or favorites, I might say, among my parents. With their stable careers, large homes, ideal marriages, and those cute Christmas card families, my brother, 35M, and sister, 32F, were everything parents could boast about. My sister is a lawyer of some sort, and my brother works in finance. Both of them reside in lovely suburban communities with spouses who complement their professional backgrounds. Every family gathering is an opportunity for my parents to brag about their kids to friends and family. And then me. 2 years ago, I left my corporate position to launch a modest business of which I am really proud. I'm content with my life and earn enough money to live comfortably. Together, my 5-year boyfriend and I share a rental home. Even though we're not making a lot of money, we're doing okay. But my folks had a different perspective. Stable and traditional are terms they frequently use, and I suppose I don't suit that description. The subtle jabs about my hobby job and remarks about how much better my life would be if I had persisted with a 9-to-5 have become unimportant to me. On the surface, we've always been courteous, but the tension has been for years. I didn't believe it was this horrible though. I came across my cousin's tale on Instagram a few weeks ago while perusing the platform. She appeared to be at a large family reunion. With all of the extended family gathered in one house, it was the type of gathering that my family often hosts a few times a year. There were my sister and brother, grinning with their partners. Except for me, my aunt, uncle and cousins were all tagged. I initially believed that I might have missed the group conversation. Perhaps the invitation got lost in all of my alerts. I sent my siblings an SMS. While my sister responds more slowly, she doesn't entirely ignore me, and my brother typically responds right away. Nothing happened for hours. I began to have the strange sensation in my chest that occurs when you know something is amiss but are reluctant to acknowledge it just yet. I called my mother the following day. I asked her how she was doing and if there had been a get-together, using a conversational tone. For far too long, the phone line went silent. She said, "Oh, the reunion? I didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy with your little business and everything." I took a moment to answer. I questioned her about why she thought I wouldn't want to attend. After all, my family is my family. She seemed to be trying to shrug the discussion aside as her voice became lighter. "We just didn't want to bother you, sweetheart. Besides, you've missed a few events before." Indeed, but primarily due to work, and not without informing them. As I persisted, it became increasingly evident that my absence was not an accident. They hadn't forgotten me. They had declined my invitation. Something about hearing it firsthand made my stomach plummet, and I'm not sure why. I hung up and sat there listening to the exchange again. I had previously experienced exclusion. Plans for many of the holidays seemed to center around my brothers' or sisters' families. I used to convince myself that it wasn't deliberate. Perhaps they didn't consider how I would fit into their plans because I didn't have children or a conventional lifestyle. I was unable to ignore it any longer, though, as I sat in my peaceful kitchen and watched my boyfriend work in the other room. This was intentional. My partner was incensed on my behalf when I told him, "You need to go anyway. They don't get to decide you don't belong there," he replied. He was correct. Why should I allow them to act as though I don't exist? I was tired of being treated like an afterthought by my family. Whether they liked it or not, I deserved to be a member of my family. The plan began to take shape at that point. I had been holding on to one card for weeks, and I hadn't played it yet. 2 weeks prior, my boyfriend and I had become engaged. I wanted to do it face to face with the people who should be concerned about my life, but we hadn't notified anyone. Now, though, I had my own motives. I would remind them of my presence if they were considering excluding me from my family. This time, they wouldn't ignore me. I made the decision to arrive without warning. I declined my boyfriend's, bless him, invitation to accompany me. I had to take care of this on my own. We devised a contingency plan, and he agreed to drive up and grab me if things didn't work out. If they didn't want me there, I would arrive and then depart, but not before telling them what I had to say. In order to make it appear as though I had always meant to attend, I prepared a large quantity of snacks to bring with me in the days before. For me, this wasn't about proving myself, even if my partner insisted that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had to be there for myself. I had had enough of fading away because they didn't think I belonged. I promised myself that if I had to leave, I would go, smile, and share my news. Although I had no control on their feelings toward me, I did have influence over how I responded to it. I refused to let them treat me like an outsider for once. Additionally, I would at least have closure if things didn't work out. First update. It took slightly over 3 hours to go to my folks' house. The majority of time was spent on how to appear unimpressed, as if I had simply happened to stop by since, well, I was aware of the family reunion. It seemed a bit ironic given why I was there, but the box of handmade cookies on the passenger seat smelled sweet and soothing. After checking the place twice, my partner assured me that he would be prepared to come get me if I needed a way out. I promised to keep him informed. The house was filled with automobiles parked on the lawn and along the driveway when I eventually pulled there. I inhaled deeply, picked up the treat box, and made my way to the front door. From within came the sounds of music, laughter, and clinking dishes. I stepped through the slightly open door. The noise stopped as soon as I entered. I knew they had all seen me without having to glance up. I sensed dozens of eyes swinging toward me as conversations broke off in the middle of sentences. My mother recovered first. She hurried over, her voice too happy and high. "Oh, you succeeded? How unexpected?" She merely patted my arm and moved away without giving me an embrace. Her eyes did not meet the phony warmth in her voice. There was an uneasy shuffle of movement in the room. People resumed their talks, but things had changed. Before my brother vanished into the kitchen, I saw him and my sister looking at each other across the room. Standing with her husband, my sister gave me a quick look before launching back into a boisterous discussion with other aunts. Across the room, I saw my cousin, the same person whose Instagram tale had given me the hint. Despite her apparent astonishment at seeing me, she nodded and smiled slightly. On the dining table, I set my package of goodies next to a spread of what appeared to be catered cuisine. Nobody even looked at my belongings. It hurt when I heard an aunt whispering to someone by the hallway, "Did they not invite her on purpose?" While I was moving through the room, I slipped by them into the living room after pausing to check my phone. My cousin drew me aside a few minutes later. She lowered her voice and looked over her shoulder. "They didn't think you'd come. Your parents, well, they didn't think you'd fit in here anymore." In spite of her apparent remorse, she said, "Fit in," as if I were a shattered puzzle piece in a family portrait. My dad was by the drink station when I left, but I can't recall what I muttered in response. I made the decision to give it a try. I questioned him why no one had told me about the reunion. As he filled the glass, he hardly raised his head to say, "We thought you'd be happier doing your own thing." The words hung thick in the air, yet it wasn't unkind. Since it was clear that I would not receive answers, I didn't press him any further. I didn't feel like making small chat with relatives who were acting as though they didn't see me, and the box of cookies I had brought was still unopened on the table. But it wasn't all bad. A few of my younger cousins approached to greet me. I felt a little better when they inquired about my company and mentioned that they had seen some of my work online. Someone cared about my life, at least. Once more, there was a bustle of talk in the room, and I sat down close to the corner and browsed through my phone idly. I simply needed time to think on what to do next. I didn't want to cause a scene. My sister's voice broke through the commotion at that point. Her face was beaming with joy as she clapped her hands. The room fell silent as she said, "Everyone, I have some news to share." And everyone's eyes shifted to her as she revealed she was expecting her second child. Cheers broke out. As everyone applauded, a few uncles made a joke about placing wagers on whether it would be a girl or a boy. My mother appeared as though she could burst with joy. Nobody gave me a sidelong glance. As I stood there, I heard the laughter and congrats. I seemed to have vanished once more. As usual, the same motif. The fact that I was present was irrelevant. The fact that I had arrived even though I hadn't been invited didn't matter. They would always treat me like an outsider and glorify my siblings. Something broke inside of me. I'm not sure if it was my dad's departure, the rumors I had heard, or the fact that my cookies were still unopened. Perhaps it was everything. I took a glass off the drink table and gave it a loud fork clink. Heads turned to face me as the room gradually became quiet once more. After enjoying the attention, my sister became irritated. I choose to disregard it. "Well," I continued steadily, "I have something to say too, since we're sharing big news." Second update. As soon as I walked in, the place was silent once more. All eyes were on me, all conversations halted, and forks froze in mid-air. But compared to when my sister revealed her pregnancy, the attention wasn't as enthusiastic or welcoming. I felt as though I had disturbed a sacred item. Despite my racing heart, I stood up and held my hand firm. "I just wanted to share some news of my own," I said. I raised my left hand to reveal the engagement ring, which sparkled in the light from the dining room. No one responded for a second when I said, "I got engaged 2 weeks ago." The silence was then broken by a few dispersed claps. From the side of the room, my little cousins, God bless them, cheered me on. The rest of the room remained motionless, as though they were still processing it, but a courteous uncle gave a nod of assent. Before forcing a faint smile, the kind she typically saved for strangers, my mom's face fell. "Why didn't you inform us earlier?" Her voice sounded more like an accusation than one of enthusiasm or inquiry. Her gaze flicked to the ring and then returned to me. I didn't think twice. I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I wasn't sure you'd care. I wasn't invited here, after all. I assumed you no longer wanted me to be involved in family matters." Discomfort spread throughout the room. Pretending to check their phones, people looked at each other or moved in their seats. After standing by the kitchen doorway, my brother moved forward and pushed off the frame. His voice was sharp, and his face was crimson. "You are not the focus of this. You have to put yourself first at all times." There was a response to that. A few whispered to themselves, "Not now." Yet I could sense that everyone was observing. My brother's crossed arms and intense gaze made it difficult for me to speak. "So I did." "Really?" I shot back. "You all seem fine without me, but I don't remember getting an invitation to this little party. My engagement is as significant as the news of anybody else." The room became silent once more at that point. My sister refused to look at me since she was still blushing from her own news. My mother's courteous facade was beginning to crumble, and her face changed to one that was more recognizable. Annoyance. I saw her take a breath, likely to speak, but before she could, a voice broke the silence. One of my relatives remarked, "She has every reason to be angry." Her arms were folded as she sat close to the couch's edge. What did you expect if you didn't invite her? That she would simply remain silent indefinitely? Some people turned to look at my cousin. From the dining table came another voice. Yes, it's not as though she's incorrect. I sensed a change for a split second. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. The fissures were visible. My mom shifted the topic, as she always does when she's cornered, likely understanding she was losing control of the situation. Well, let's not forget how exciting it is that your sister is having another baby, she remarked, bringing a smile back to her voice. The family is thrilled to hear that. There was a deflection, so clear. She was unable to give me this moment, not even for a brief moment. Immediately, the focus returned to my sister, who grinned broadly and thanked everyone once more for their congrats. My brother gave me a cocky grin like he was saying, "See? I was done." I took my phone out of my pocket and texted my lover, "Come get me," without uttering a word. I wasn't going to stay any longer than absolutely necessary. I picked up my handbag and made my way to the front entrance. Two of my younger relatives hurried after me, apologizing and inquiring as to where I was going. One of them hugged me and whispered, "You don't deserve this?" I returned the hug and assured her that I would be all right. It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough to hear my dad murmur, "Drama queen," from the side of the room as I was putting on my coat. I hesitated for a moment, but I didn't look back. Rather, I opened the door and went outdoors. The cool air cleared the heaviness in my chest and struck me like a jolt. One of my relatives came running out after me before I had gone halfway down the driveway. Her shoes crunched on the gravel as she jogged to catch up. "Hold on," she yelled. I paused and looked at her. She appeared embarrassed, almost as if she was at a loss for words. "I apologize," she blurted. "For everything." It was courageous. In there you defended yourself. That was not how you should have been treated. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I managed to say, "Thanks." Perhaps someone from inside asked what I was doing when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She rushed back toward the house after giving me one final pitying glance. After a few minutes, my boyfriend's vehicle arrived. I buckled my seatbelt, threw my purse on the seat and got in. I started crying as soon as I sensed the car moving. The tears flowed quickly and forcefully, like if I had been suppressing them for hours. My guy simply reached over and squeezed my hand without saying anything. As the trees beyond the window blurred by, I let it all out. The sobbing had subsided into soft sniffles by the time we drove onto the main road. Although I still felt raw and ashamed, there was also relief behind all of that. I hadn't just let it happen for the first time. I had raised my voice. Even if they didn't want to, I forced them to see me. Third update. At first, the only sound on the drive home was the hum of the road. As my fiancé drove, I gazed out the window, mentally reliving every moment of the recent reunion. I eventually opened up, discussing my brother's teasing, my dad's remark about my being a drama queen, my mother's disregard for me, and how my sister's pregnancy announcement had been the last straw. It all spilled out. With his palm resting on the gear shift, my fiancé listened and occasionally nodded. "You did the right thing," he added, looking over when I was done. "They have no right to declare you unimportant. We will proceed without requiring their consent." It was helpful to hear, yet I remained silent. My phone buzzed as we got close to home. I looked down. The cousin who had followed me out of the gathering had left me a message. "You were correct. For a long time, your parents have been discussing you behind your back." I straightened my posture. There was more to the message. "I apologize, but you must understand this. Your mother told everyone that your lack of a steady career makes you a disappointment. Additionally, she stated that your sister's announcement is far more significant than your engagement." It didn't seem fair to me. In an attempt to comprehend the words, I read them twice. I was still looking at the screen when I received a second message, this one containing screenshots. It came from a family catch-ups group chat, of which I had obviously been excluded. My mother's name was prominently displayed in one of the screenshots. I'm not sure why she would want to attend anyhow. She constantly makes things about herself and does her own thing. Giving up a real career to pretend to be a business owner? So self-centered. If nothing else, sister is leading a life of which we may be proud. My chest constricted. The subsequent screen grab was even worse. Since I didn't want her to show up and ruin the day with a dramatic story about her engagement, I honestly didn't notify her about the reunion. Who cares? She's not getting married first, after all. When the television came back to life, I sensed my fiancé looking at me. "What is it?" he inquired. "Proof," I muttered. I was still gazing at the screenshots when we arrived home. I entered my family group chat, which I had been kicked out of years ago and was only periodically added back in for important updates, and added myself back in. I wasn't sure if this was because I was angry, wounded, or incredulous. I sent the screenshots as soon as I noticed my name appeared in the chat. Just those receipts for everyone to see, nothing else. I typed, "Is this how you truly feel about me?" a few seconds later. I suppose I ought to have remained forgotten at that time. Setting my phone aside, I waited. It was not long before the responses began to pour in. First to enter, my brother said, "This was private. You're blowing things out of proportion and being dramatic as usual." My sister then asked, "What did you anticipate would happen if you shared this? For no apparent reason, you're making things worse. Give it up." Their texts appeared like fast fire as I watched them type one after the other. Before my mother's name was ultimately displayed, I gave them a minute to vent. Compared to the others, her message was longer. Those remarks were misconstrued. "I don't like you creating all this needless drama, and you're reading too much into things. You've been overly sensitive all along. Taken out of context?" I scribbled a response as I took up the phone once more. "I'm offended because this is not how any parent should discuss their child. This is your opinion of me, even though I wasn't invited to my own family's reunion?" My dad's name showed up in the chat for the first time, but he only typed a scene tag beneath my message instead of typing anything. I didn't stay to finish reading it. I threw my phone onto the couch and placed it on silent. Sitting beside me, my fiancé drew me in. However, my phone buzzed once again shortly after. One of my aunts sent me a private message saying, "I had no idea that any of this was going on. I sincerely apologize for the treatment you received. You're worthy of better." Another reply arrived a few minutes later, saying, "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself. Nobody should be able to convince you otherwise." Although it wasn't much, it gave me hope that I wasn't going insane. I wondered for a long time if I was exaggerating. As my mother used to say, I might have been overly sensitive. However, I now had evidence, and a few supporters, at the very least. My phone rang just as I was beginning to believe that the worst was past. The name of my sister appeared on the screen. I nearly didn't respond, but I did. She wasted no time at all. She remarked, "You're destroying the family dynamic. What prevented you from letting it go? Mom didn't want any conflict, therefore she didn't invite you. You have merely exacerbated the situation." I refrained from arguing. I didn't shout. "You don't let go of not being invited to your own family's reunion," I simply retorted. Then she hung up the phone. I decided I'd had enough that evening as I sat with my fiancé. I wasn't going to ask for their blessing all the time. A family who obviously didn't want me around was not someone I was going to pursue. I have to back down for my own mental health. The group chat was erased by me. My sister's number was blocked by me. And I allowed myself to give up for the first time in years. If love wasn't offered freely, I wouldn't beg for it. Update 4. My phone called out of the blue a week after the repercussions from the family group chat. I froze after taking a quick look at the screen. It was my father. For background, I didn't get many calls from my dad. Never. I was astonished to see his name appear because he mainly left family affairs to my mom. I considered leaving it on voicemail, but my curiosity won out. I took it up. He initially only made the customary awkward small talk. After a lengthy silence, he finally stated that he wanted to clarify the reunion. He spoke in a rigid, nearly practiced voice. He maintained it wasn't intended to harm me and referred to it as a miscommunication. I hadn't heard anything like an apology from him in a long time. I didn't give him a pass. I inquired as to why I hadn't been invited earlier. After struggling to find the right words, he finally said, "It wasn't intentional." I told him that didn't make sense since how can it be an accident to forget to invite your own child? I persisted, reminding him that my mother's own remarks in the group chat demonstrated differently, but he didn't respond. A second too long, the silence lingered, and then he broke. Quietly, he acknowledged. "She believed it would be better that way. Your mother did not wish for any conflict." That's when I heard it. My mother's voice, followed by a slight background rustle. She must have been using the speakerphone to listen in because she abruptly interrupted the conversation. She answered abruptly, "I'm here too." As though I had called her somehow. The waterworks then began. She accused me of attacking her and making the family feel ashamed by publishing the screenshots, but her voice faltered. She claimed that I, not she, was the source of the issues. She claimed that I had made everything public only to cause her embarrassment and trouble. I didn't shout or argue. I spoke steadily and assured her that I was only seeking the truth and wasn't making any personal attacks. After hearing what was going on, my fiancé, who had been sitting close by, approached. It was enough to ground me when he placed a hand on my shoulder and muttered, "Don't let them twist this." My mother's tone altered when she saw that I wasn't going to back down. After giving a loud sniff, she continued, "You only announced your engagement at the reunion to steal your sister's spotlight," which almost made me laugh aloud. I didn't think twice. Calmly, I informed her that, like my sister, I had every right to share good news about my life. No one was in competition with me. I informed her that none of this would have occurred if I had been invited in the first place. I could tell I had touched a nerve by the quiet that ensued. She chose to play the victim, which is her favorite approach, rather than admit anything. "It might be better if you don't attend family gatherings at all if you can't forgive us and move on," she remarked forcefully. And there it was, the final command. I remained calm. I refrained from crying. I simply exhaled and answered, "If that's how you feel, then fine," before hanging up. I sat there looking at the phone in my hand for a minute. My fiancé took a seat beside me and waited silently. I told him everything that had transpired, including my mom's accusation and ultimatum, as well as my dad's hesitant apology. "They're showing you exactly who they are," he continued, nodding. I lay in bed that night and gazed up at the ceiling. I kept replaying the phone call in my head. More than that, though, I began to reflect on all the events that had preceded this. I reflected on the holidays I had spent by myself since my siblings' families came first. My parents' constant comparisons of my unstable career to my brother's corner office and sister's work at the law company. The understated appearance. The contemptuous remarks. This was where it had all been leading. As I laid there, I came to the realization that I didn't deserve this. I wasn't worthy of fighting for meager affection or acting as though nothing was wrong. My siblings would always come first, as my family had often demonstrated to me. For the first time, I made the decision to stop pursuing those who made me feel inadequate. My fiancé sat down across from me and handed me a cup of coffee the following morning. He had a solemn expression. He remarked, "I've been thinking. How about hosting our own engagement celebration? Something modest, just those who genuinely stand by us." The concept sounded odd at first. I hadn't even considered celebrating without my family because they had been my default for so long. However, it made more sense the more I about it. Why should I continue to expend my energy on indifferent people? People that loved us for who we were, not who they wanted us to be, were the ones I wanted to celebrate this milestone with. After the reunion, we had a list of friends, my fiancé's family, and a couple of cousins who had gotten in touch with me privately. They all agreed that I was deserving of better treatment. I made the decision to focus on the folks who came to me unconditionally and let go of the things I couldn't control. I kept the celebration a secret from my parents and siblings. I was tired of trying to mend something that had been damaged for years and realized that it would only lead to more turmoil at this point. I was not going to plead for their affection or acceptance for the first time in my life. I had given up trying to find a family that didn't recognize me. At last, I was making my own decision. Fifth update, everything I didn't know I needed was provided at the engagement party. Just my fiancé's family, a few of my relatives who had been there for me through all the turmoil, and close friends made it modest and private. We arranged our backyard with string lights, served a variety of takeout and homemade cuisine, and adorned the tables with flowers that my fiancé had purchased from a nearby market. EasyJet ideal. Early in the evening, people began to arrive. I hadn't experienced such genuine enthusiasm at a family gathering in years, but the atmosphere was lighthearted and full of laughs. As soon as she got there, the cousin who had sent me the screenshots gave me a hug. "You're worthy of better," she said. She didn't mention the reunion, which I appreciated. "We're proud of you." An hour later, the biggest surprise arrived. Another car drew up to the curb, and my fiancé gave me a little shove. One of my aunts was leaving when I turned around. This aunt wasn't just any aunt though. She was the only one to privately text me to apologize and say she didn't know what had been going on following the group chat controversy. She was unexpected, but there she was, smiling warmly and holding a modest wrapped gift. As she entered the yard, she added, "I hope it's okay that I came?" She gave me a hug, and for a second I was speechless. "I wanted to see you both and say congratulations in person." I simply nodded and opened the door for her. It meant more to me than words could express to have her there. The folks who came through for me without reservation were more important than the statistics. Throughout the evening, my fiancé made a toast. The audience became silent as he lifted his glass. "To my future wife," he remarked with a smile. I've seen her overcome so many obstacles and still come out stronger. Her character and the life we are creating together make me really proud. As the audience applauded, someone exclaimed, "To the happy couple." People who truly wanted to join us in celebrating were all around me as I stood there with my glass. I felt like I was being seen for the first time. There was only love, no backstabbing remarks, no comparisons, and no compulsion to prove anything. We stayed around the fire pit with a few pals and ended up wrapping things late. I was not mistaken when one of my relatives remarked, laughing, "I haven't seen you this happy in years." After 2 weeks, I received an unexpected email. My dad gave it to me. Before I opened my email, I sat there looking at his name. He apologized first. It felt different this time. He acknowledged that, both during the reunion and in other instances prior to it, he had not defended me. He expressed guilt for not doing more to help me feel included and claimed he had no idea how much I had been harmed over the years. "I know I haven't spoken anything when you needed me to," he wrote. "Even though it might take some time, I hope we can begin repairing our friendship." I scrolled down after reading it twice. His addition at the bottom, "Your mom still doesn't see things the same way," caused me to pause. I'm not sure whether she will ever own up to her faults because she feels like the true victim in all of this. I also apologize for that. Although it hurt, it wasn't shocking. My mother had never taken responsibility for anything. I took some time to consider my response, and then I typed up a brief one. I praised my dad for getting in touch and let him know that while I valued his words, I value his deeds more. It would require work on all sides if he really wanted to rebuild things. I honestly didn't require a response, so I didn't anticipate one right away. I wasn't waiting for him to suddenly turn into the ideal father. His little step was plenty for now. However, I wouldn't accept compromises. I refused to put myself back in a situation where I didn't feel appreciated. Naturally, my sister couldn't help but stir things up. A few days later, I came upon one of her passive-aggressive Facebook posts. It was ambiguous but clear enough. It's funny how some people enjoy revealing personal details to get attention. Good or bad, family is family. I didn't answer. I didn't even give myself enough time to become upset about it. After blocking her, I simply went on. Her opinions, her sarcasm, and her judgment no longer had any influence over me. Life was fuller but quieter in the weeks that followed. I concentrated on running my company, organizing our wedding, and hanging out with the individuals who genuinely cared about me. I at last discovered serenity when I let go of the need to win my family's approval. In retrospect, I saw how much of my life had been wasted attempting to conform to a model that I was never meant to fit. Because I was different, my family had always made me feel inferior. However, that didn't prove me incorrect. Their incapacity to recognize my value was a reflection of them, not of me. Family is everything, as some people may say, and perhaps it is true for them. However, rather than condemnation and exclusion, family should be about love, respect, and support. I've never been happier as I'm finally creating a life with individuals that support me unconditionally. So here I am, going forth guilt-free and regret-free. I have no idea what the future holds for my parents or siblings, but I do know that I will never longer accept anything less than what I am worthy of. And to be honest, it feels really nice. After my husband gave his mother a key to our home and helped her destroy my life, I exposed their lies with the police at my doorstep. When I opened my front door, I didn't notice the strewn documents or the toppled furniture right away. It was the quietness, that oppressive, strange hush that envelops you like a veil of death and whispers that something is gravely amiss. My name is Audrey, and I recently attended a 3-day business retreat where I learned how to trust my coworkers through absurd team-building activities. Now that I'm standing in my cluttered living room, I see that I should have prioritized trusting my own family more. As I called Ryan's phone, my fingers were shaking. Voicemail's recognizable click is heard after 1 or 2 rings. Naturally, my beloved husband was most likely at his mother's place, acting as though he had no idea why his wife had called. "Ryan, someone broke into the house. The safe is open, call me back immediately." I cataloged the damage as I wandered through the wreckage of my home. The couch cushions were cut open, drawers were pulled out and emptied, and picture frames were placed face down. However, they hadn't been searching for cash or valuables. This was personal, no. My grandmother's letters, the only remnants of her that I still possessed, were the first thing they targeted. It buzzed on my phone. Not Ryan. Evan at work. He inquired. "How's the drive back?" "Someone broke into my house," I said, shaking my voice. "The safe. They knew the combination." "Jesus, are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I tossed away a ripped magazine and said, "No. I know exactly who did this. Helen's fingerprints are all over this mess. She's been trying to get those letters for months." "Your mother-in-law? Why would she?" I arrived at the kitchen, where all the cabinets were empty, and said, "Because she can't stand that Ryan married someone who won't bow to her every whim. She thinks those letters prove my grandmother's family wronged hers decades ago, some ancient real estate dispute she won't let die." When Evan said, "Call the police." "And tell them what?" "That my mother-in-law used a key my husband probably gave her to steal family documents. That my sister-in-law probably helped because she's bitter about her divorce and wants to hurt someone else's marriage." Though it sounded empty, I chuckled. "They're too smart for that. They'll say Ryan gave them permission. It'll be my word against the entire Miller family." The door to the basement was ajar. I had not yet looked down there. "I have to go, Evan. I need to see what else they took." "Audrey, wait." After hanging up, I went down the stairs. My feet creaked with every stride. More mayhem was shown when the basement light flicked on. However, I noticed a tiny piece of paper stuck behind a toppled box. I managed to liberate it. It was a 3-day-old receipt for a duplicate key from the hardware store. Once more, my phone buzzed. "Ryan." Before I could say anything, he inquired, "Where are you?" "At Mom's," it was his words. "Listen, Audrey, I can explain." "Did you give her a key?" "Quiet." "Afterwards. She just wanted to look for some old family photos while you were away. I didn't think." "You never do think when it comes to her, do you?" I clenched my fist around the receipt. Those letters were all I had left of my grandmother, Ryan. The only things that were truly mine. "We can talk about this when I get home." "No." The word was piercing enough to pierce. "We'll talk about this in front of everyone. I'm coming over there right now. And Ryan, tell your mother to prepare for war." After hanging up, I stood in my basement, surrounded by the ruins of faith. Like everyone else in their lives, they believed they could break me and force me to submit to their authority. However, they were unaware of what they had just begun. Sometimes the opponent who knows how to hit back harder is more dangerous than the one who hits first. My skin crawled when I saw Helen's immaculate living room. While my house was in ruins across town, everything else was in its proper place, not even a cushion out of place. Helen's interpretation of reality was depicted through the carefully chosen family images on her walls, which conveyed the story of Ryan and Chloe's early years. There aren't any photos of my wedding day in them. Helen poured tea into exquisite cups, her voice dripping with honeyed, delicious poison. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said. "Ryan gave me permission to look for old family albums while you were away, nothing more." With her arms folded and her wedding ring noticeably missing, Chloe sat next to her mother. "You're being hysterical, Audrey, as usual." I put the receipt from the hardware store on the coffee table. "Funny how you needed a new key made 3 days ago. Planning ahead?" Eyes flitting between his mother and myself, Ryan shifted in his seat and said, "Maybe we should all calm down." "Oh, we're very calm," I remarked as I observed Helen's immaculately manicured fingers encircling her teacup. "Just like we were calm last Christmas when you went through my phone while I was sleeping. Or last month, when you showed up unannounced at my office to check on me. When Helen said, 'I worry about my son. Someone needs to look out for his interests.'" "His interests?" I laughed till my throat ached from the broken glass. "Or yours. Mother was right about you from the start." Chloe's eyes shone as she leaned forward. "You never understood our family, always keeping secrets, hiding things in that safe of yours. Those letters belong to my grandmother. Letters that prove your family cheated ours 60 years ago." Helen's mask broke. "That property should have been ours. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she," Ryan warned, but it was too late. Slowly, the pieces clicked into place as I stood up. "So you admit you took them?" Helen's face suddenly became smoother. I admitted nothing. "And you have no proof?" With my hand hovering over the record button, I took out my phone and said, "You're right. But I will. Ryan, are you coming home or staying here?" He glanced at his mother, then at me, constantly conflicted, always taking the easy route. "I think maybe we all need space to cool off." I paused to glance back at Helen before making my way to the door, saying, "Wrong answer. You know what's funny? Those letters you stole? They're not even the originals. Just copies I kept as decoys. Grandmother taught me well. Always keep what matters most where manipulative people can't reach it." The clatter of Helen's teacup against its saucer was heard. "You're lying." I asked. "Am I? Guess you'll have to wonder about that, along with what else I might have hidden away." I looked into Ryan's eyes. Don't bother coming home tonight, or maybe ever. He started to get up, but Chloe grabbed his arm and said, Audrey, wait. She urged. Let her go. She's just trying to manipulate you, like always. I left Helen's well-organized world behind and made my way to my car. I held the steering wheel with trembling hands, but not because of terror. As I had previously stated, the originals were secure because they had been kept in a safety deposit box ever since I married Ryan and seen Helen's hunger when Grandma's letters were brought up during the wedding. It buzzed on my phone. Evan once more. He inquired, how bad was it? They fell for the ruse. Helen essentially admitted it. I started the engine, but I have another task for you. Remember that security system you installed at your lake house? The one with the hidden cameras? Yeah, why? Because I'm done playing defense. They want to go through my things. Let's make sure we catch them in the act next time. As I backed away, I noticed Helen's house become smaller in my rear-view mirror. And Evan, thank you for being the one person in my life who actually listens. Always. But Audrey, just be careful. People like that, they're most dangerous when they're cornered. With plans already racing through my head, I hung up the phone. Helen believed she knew everything there was to know about me. She understood me well. She had overlooked one important fact, though. I had observed her influence everyone for 3 years. It was time to apply the principles I had acquired from the greatest. Although it wasn't my typical location, the coffee shop across from Helen's preferred hairdresser offered me the ideal view. After 2 hours of observing, Evan moved into the seat across from me and pushed a brand new cup in my direction. His words, the cameras are set up. Motion sensors, night vision, everything feeding directly to your phone. But are you sure about this? I gestured to the window of the salon where Helen and Chloe were sitting, receiving their weekly manicures. I hit the play button on my phone and said, listen. During our confrontation, the bug I had placed in Helen's handbag allowed me to hear their voice as well. Helen was stating, we need those original letters. That safety deposit box has to be at her bank downtown. Ryan says she's been going through their financial records, said Chloe. Probably planning to divorce him and take everything. She yelled, over my dead body, Helen. I didn't spend 30 years building this family's reputation to have her destroy it. We're going back to the house tomorrow while she's at work. There has to be something we can use against her. I put an end to the recording. Still think I'm paranoid? Evan's expression stiffened. We should take this to the police and tell them? I put my hands around the steaming cup and said, and tell them what? That my mother-in-law is planning to rob me? They'll say it's a family matter. Besides, I want more than just stopping them. I want them to face consequences for once in their privileged lives. It buzzed on my phone. Ryan. I'm calling once more. For the 3rd time today. I turned it down. He's been sleeping at their house, I said. Probably plotting with them, trying to figure out where the originals are. Or maybe he's worried about you. My coffee tasted unpleasant, so I said, then he should have worried before giving them a key to our house. Before choosing them over me again. Ryan texted. Come home, please. We must speak. Home, I whispered. Like that means anything anymore? Evan bent over. Audrey, I know you're hurt, but... The entrance of the salon chimed. Helen and Chloe came out with shiny new manicures. Helen stopped and stared straight into the coffee shop window as they made their way to her Mercedes. I remained motionless. Unable to breathe. Her mouth formed the sly smirk I had come to despise. She was aware that I was observing. I said, time to go. And suddenly stood up. They'll be at my house tomorrow at 10 o'clock, according to their usual schedule. That's when we'll catch them. Evan's eyebrows went up. I thought you wanted to handle this yourself. I did. I do. I collected my belongings, my hands trembling a little. I can't face them alone anymore. I need someone in my corner. Always. He lightly touched my arm. Just promise me something. Don't let revenge consume you. I've seen what it does to people. As I watched Helen's car drive away, I thought back to our wedding reception, when she had cornered me in the restroom and first revealed her true nature. You'll never be good enough for this family, she'd stated. One day, Ryan will realize that. I informed Evan, this isn't about retaliation. It's about justice. And maybe saving Ryan from them, even if he doesn't want to be saved. Once more, my phone buzzed. A message from an unidentified number. When I opened it, my blood froze. Found something interesting in your grandmother's old law firm records. Tomorrow noon, Riverside Park. Come alone, or Ryan learns everything about the Anderson case. Evan saw my face. What's wrong? With my thoughts racing, I closed the message. My grandmother's greatest regret, the secret she carried to her grave, and the true cause of Helen's animosity toward our family was the Anderson case. Nothing, I pretended to smile. Just work stuff. I should go prepare for tomorrow. But Helen's comments from 3 years ago kept repeating in my mind as I made my way to my car. Ryan will understand it one day. Perhaps she was correct. Perhaps he would tomorrow. Perhaps it was time for him to do so. At lunchtime, Riverside Park appeared different, somehow cooler. Holding a manila envelope containing ammunition for whatever game Helen was playing, I sat on a bench. The case files of Anderson. Decades ago, my grandma had sealed them away. In my hands now, they were a weapon. A shadow landed on my lap. Not Helen. Ryan. My mother told me everything, he claimed. He sat next to me, keeping a safe distance from me. About the Anderson case. About what your grandmother did to our family. It felt like a heavier envelope. Did she tell you how your grandfather tried to blackmail mine? How he threatened to destroy their law firm unless they gave him that property? That's not, he paused, face rubbing. She said you'd try to twist things, like she twisted you. I looked over at him. When did you give her the safe combination, Ryan? His silence was sufficient response. I went on. The day after our wedding. When she convinced you I was hiding something. That's why you've been checking our bank statements, right? Looking for evidence I'm stealing from you. I was protecting our family. Our family? I laughed, but my voice didn't sound like it. There is no our family. There's only ever been yours. It buzzed on my phone. Regarding the cameras he had set, Evan was messaging. Everything was prepared for the trap of tomorrow. All of a sudden, though, it felt empty. She's using you, I whispered. She always has. And you let her, because it's easier than standing up to her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I dropped the envelope on his lap and stood up. Here. The precious Anderson case files. Proof that your grandfather was the one who committed fraud, not mine. Proof that your mother's been lying all these years. He gazed intently at the envelope. How did you get them? From my grandmother's old partner. Turns out, he's been waiting years for someone to finally expose the truth. I took a step back. But you know what? Keep them. Burn them. Give them to Helen. I don't care anymore. Audrey, wait. I filed for divorce yesterday. The words hung like broken glass between us. Ryan's face turned white. You what? Check your email. The papers should arrive today. Now my hands were steady. I'm done being the villain in Helen's story. Done watching you choose them over me. Done pretending we have a marriage worth saving. He approached me as he rose up and said, we can fix this. I'll talk to Mother. That's exactly the problem, I said, stepping back from his contact. Your first instinct is still to run to her. It always will be. Once more my phone buzzed. This time, Helen. Where are you? We had a deal. I returned the type. The deal has changed. Inquire about the files with Ryan. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage, Ryan stated. I started to go, but stopped when I heard. You already did that when you gave them the key to our house. You know what the saddest part is? I actually thought I could save you from them. But you don't want to be saved. Audrey. Goodbye, Ryan. I passed the seat where we used to have Sunday lunches and the location where he had proposed as I strolled through the park. Helen, Ryan, and even Chloe were all buzzing on my phone. I made them all quiet. Only Evan's message was received. The cameras are in real time. Do you still intend to carry out tomorrow's plan? At the park's exit, I paused and took one final glance back. Ryan appeared disoriented as he stood where I had left him, holding the package tightly. My determination faltered for a second. Then I recalled the broken safe, the broken house, and the 3 years of gaslighting and deceptive tactics. Yes, I did reply to the text. However, plans changed. I no longer only wished to catch them in the act. What are you looking for? I observed as Ryan, who was constantly rushing back to Mother, took out his phone and most likely called Helen. I typed, I want to destroy them, each and every one. Because sometimes destroying everything and starting anew is the only way to save yourself. I was sitting in my car across the street when the security camera feed flashed on my laptop screen. Helen's typical Thursday morning interruption is 10 minutes away. Every aspect of my property, including the front and back doors as well as the garden walk Helen loved to criticize, was caught by Evan's intricate setup. From the passenger seat, Evan said, You don't have to watch this. We can just let the cameras record. My coffee cup made my fingers whiten. I need to see it. Need to know exactly how they do it. Helen's Mercedes smoothly came to a stop in front of my house on time. Chloe followed her out, as always immaculately styled. Then a third door opened, and Ryan appeared. In my hands, the coffee cup crumbled. He is assisting them. They went to the main door. Ryan looked over his shoulder anxiously. Helen gestured angrily as she spoke. He produced his original key, not the duplicate. Jesus, whispered Evan. Audrey, maybe we should wait. As a fourth figure stepped out of Helen's car, I took hold of his arm. Who is that? With a briefcase in hand, the man in the pricey suit walked with authority. Somehow, he looked familiar. That's James Morton, Evan announced. Helen's lawyer. I've seen him at charity events. The group vanished within my home. I flipped between camera angles, seeing them navigate places with unsettling resemblance. Helen led them as a general would lead soldiers. She said, "The study," clearly audible over the covert microphones. "Those Anderson files have to be here somewhere." "Mother," added her. "She said she gave them to me." Ryan made a feeble protest. "Copies, obviously." Helen yelled, "You think your wife would give up her only leverage? Search everything." Once more I saw them tearing up my house. However, things were different this time. This time, I noticed that Ryan was opening drawers with trembling hands. As Chloe knocked books from the shelves, I noticed her smug smile. I witnessed Helen's disguise come off when she believed no one was looking, exposing her true desperation. Morton said, "Behind the safe," without warning. "Did you check behind it?" I gasped. The safe on the wall had been a ruse. There was nothing back there, but everyone was aware of it. "Too soon," Ryan answered. "No, there's nothing back there." Helen squinted her eyes. "Move it, mother, move it." My fingers hovered above 911 as I reached for my phone. The prior owner had installed a secret compartment behind that safe. There were documents within that showed Helen's own financial misdeeds, which were considerably more devastating than the Anderson case. Compiled with care over 3 years of observation and anticipation. Ryan took a step forward, then halted. "No," he replied. Helen turned against him asking, "What did you say?" "I said no," he said more firmly. "This ends now. We're leaving." Helen's composure broke when she asked, "After everything I've done for you?" "That woman has poisoned you against your own family," Ryan remarked. "That woman is my wife." "Not anymore," Morton cut in with ease. "The divorce papers were filed yesterday. You have no legal right to—" With my phone filming everything, I walked into the doorway and asked, "To prevent us from?" "Breaking and entering, destruction of property, conspiracy." With the exception of Helen, they all froze like guilty kids. She flashed her sly smile. "Perfect timing, dear. We were just discussing the Anderson case and other family matters." I walked deeper into the room with Evan right behind me and said, "I can see that. But you made one mistake, Helen. You got sloppy. Desperate." She responded, "I don't know what you mean," as her voice became more strained. "The Anderson case was never about property fraud, was it? It was about covering up what really happened. What you did." Her smile faltered. "You're confused." Adding, "The real documents aren't behind that safe." I looked into Ryan's astonished eyes and said, "They're already with the district attorney. Along with proof that your mother embezzled millions from her own charity foundation. That's why she's so desperate to find evidence against my family, to protect herself." Chaos ensued in the room. Ryan stood motionless between them all as Helen reached for her lawyer and Chloe began to scream. However, I continued to watch Helen as her idyllic environment fell apart. Retaliation isn't always about ruining someone. Allowing them to ruin themselves is sometimes the solution. And sometimes speaking the truth is enough to bring about justice. My living area was painted in alternating shades of blue and red by the police lights. As she talked to the authorities, Helen sat primly on the couch, tears running down her flawlessly applied face. She pointed to me and wept. She's the one who's been hurting our family. I was just trying to protect my son." "We have evidence of her harassment," Morton said with ease. "Her obsession with destroying her mother-in-law's reputation. The break-in was merely an attempt to recover documents that rightfully belonged to the family. The recording of their entrance was no longer useful, and my phone felt heavy in my pocket. Like Helen always did, they had gone ahead of me and completely changed the situation." "That isn't true," Ryan exclaimed abruptly. Everybody looked at him. "Mother, stop, just stop." Helen's weeping stopped at once. "Ryan, dear, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He moved away from her and in my direction, but I retreated. Too late, too little. The embezzlement accusations, they're true, aren't they? Asked Ryan. That's why you've been so desperate to destroy Audrey's family's reputation, to cover your tracks. Everything I did was for this family, Helen stated. Her mask fell off entirely. She pointed a finger at me and threatened to destroy everything. That money secured your future, your sister's future, she said. The officers looked at each other. He heard someone talking into his radio. Mrs. Helen Miller, we're going to need you to come down to the station. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here, she said to Morton, her attorney. Do something. Morton, meanwhile, was already moving in the direction of the entrance. I think our professional relationship has concluded, Helen, given the circumstances. After that, everything occurred pretty fast. As they led her away, Helen wailed and Chloe followed, complaining about loyalty to her family. The evidence I had acquired was being gathered, recorded, and labeled when Morton escaped during the confusion. Audrey, said Ryan. Don't, I said, putting my arms over myself as I felt icy. Just don't. I didn't know about the charity money. About any of it, I swear. I said, but you knew about the break-ins, the harassment, the lies, and my voice broke. You chose them. Every single time, you chose them. I can fix this? I pointed at our demolished house and said, fix what? My grandmother's letters are still gone. Our marriage is over. Your mother's going to jail. What exactly can you fix? There was Evan in the doorway. Audrey, the detective needs your statement. Ryan grabbed me by the arm as I tried to pursue him. I love you, he shouted frantically. Isn't that worth something? I remembered every touch, every promise, and every instance when I felt like we were actually creating something as I gazed at his hand on my arm. Then I recalled the last time I saw him pick his mother's falsehoods above my reality, helping them break into our house. I whispered, love without trust isn't love. It's just another form of control. He was standing in the ruins of our life together as I withdrew. The detective waited while filling out more paperwork and asking additional questions. I spent hours describing how I had discovered proof of Helen's embezzlement, how I had recorded her harassment, and how I had seen my marriage gradually deteriorate due to deceit and manipulation. Later, when I was by myself in my car, I took out my grandmother's final letter, not the one Helen had taken, but the authentic one. The one I'd held dear for years. Remember, dear heart, she'd wrote. Sometimes winning means walking away. Sometimes the greatest victory is in refusing to play their game at all. Ryan again buzzed on my phone. I turned off the phone and turned on the engine. He was standing in the doorway of what had been our house, looking lost, and I could see him in the rearview mirror. My heart grieved for a second, but as I drove away, I came to a realization. I had nearly turned into Helen in my attempt to destroy her. Manipulative, control-obsessed, and prepared to give anything up for success. My grandma had been correct. Taking down Helen wasn't the true victory. It was in releasing myself at last. The corridor of the courthouse was cold and long. While waiting for Helen's arraignment, I watched from a rough wooden seat while her society pals whispered to one another. They were still in shock that the president of their charitable board was being charged with embezzlement 3 weeks after the break-in. With black circles under his eyes, Ryan emerged at the end of the hallway. With her eyes like daggers, Chloe held onto his arm. I pretended to read emails while concentrating on my phone. His voice was closer than I thought. Audrey. Can we talk? I stated, the divorce papers are with your lawyer, without raising my gaze. Just sign them. He sat next to me, too near, and said, that's not. Mother wants to make a deal now. I gave him a look. A deal? If you drop the charges, she'll return all of your grandmother's letters. Bitter than coffee grinds, a giggle erupted. You don't understand, do you? All that matters is that she is still my mother, isn't that right? She made mistakes despite everything she did and everything she stole, so I stood, seeking space. Errors? She terrorized me in my own home, stole millions from her own charity, and methodically destroyed our marriage, I said, turning heads. Ryan, those aren't errors. They are options. Ryan was beckoned by Helen's smile, but before he could react, the doors of the courthouse sprang open, and Evan hurried in with a manila packet in his hand. Breathing heavily, he replied, I found it in Morton's office. With shaky fingers, I opened the envelope to reveal a single document, a letter from Helen to her lawyer dated 3 years prior to my wedding. What is that? Did Ryan ask? I looked through the contents and remarked, insurance. Just in case I ever threatened to take control of you. Helen had orchestrated this whole thing from the start. The harassment, the break-ins, everything, to make me appear crazy and fixated on the Anderson case, so I looked up as she came in handcuffed and accompanied by officers. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in Helen's eyes as they fixed themselves on the letter. "Where did that come from?" she insisted. I held up the letter and said, "Helen, you documented everything. Your lawyer isn't as loyal as you thought. Every stage of your scheme to ruin me. Everyone will now be fully aware of your identity." She rushed forward, but the officers stopped her. "You ungrateful little," she said. "Stop, Mom." Ryan positioned himself between us and said, "Stop. Everything I did was for you, to protect you from her." Helen said, her face crushed. "From where?" Ryan's voice broke. "From emotion? From a life that is beyond your control? She never loved you like I do." Helen said, her eyes hardening. "No," I cut him off. "I loved him enough to let him make his own decisions. You loved him enough to make sure he never could." The murmurs surrounding us became more intense. Chloe turned away from her mother, finally realizing the truth she had helped facilitate, and Helen's friends stared in horror as their ideal society matron broke before their own eyes. Evan whispered, "The arraignment's starting." The district attorney had been quietly waiting nearby, so I gave him the letter before turning to Ryan one more time. "I did love you," I replied. "But love shouldn't hurt like this. Audrey, please." "Goodbye, Ryan." As Helen was escorted into the courtroom, I turned to leave, her well-planned world crumbling in my wake. My grandmother's former legal partner texted me, saying, "I found something in the archives. Your grandmother would be proud." My phone rang. The autumn air outside was crisp and clean, and Evan caught up to me at the bottom of the steps leading to the courthouse. "You all right?" he inquired. As the wind pulled the leaves away from their limbs, I saw them strewn all over the sidewalk. Sincerely, I replied, "No, but I will be." Because sometimes defeating your adversaries isn't the only way to win. Refusing to allow them to ruin you is sometimes the key. And sometimes the best form of retaliation is just to walk away with your head held high, and let them deal with the fallout from their own decisions. In contrast to the suburban gloom I had left behind, the lights of downtown glittered through the window as the final box from my previous life stood unopened on the floor of my new apartment. Helen's carefully constructed reputation was shattered like a dropped teacup, and the society pages were already humming with scandal when Evan texted me about her sentencing, 5 years for embezzlement. Ryan was standing in the hallway with a familiar leather-bound bundle, and I froze when I heard a knock at the door. I recognized the pattern. 3 rapid taps, 1 slow. I said, "Grandmother's letters," with a constricted throat. He held them out as a peace gift and explained, "I found them in Mother's study while cleaning out the house. They were always yours." I took the bundle and traced the tattered edges with my fingers. "How is she?" He shrugged, saying, "Angry, bitter. She's in therapy. She claims to be beginning to comprehend certain aspects of our family. Along with you. Gaining the ability to stand alone." A painting and easel stood by the window, the canvas half covered in bold strokes of red and gold, something I'd discovered by mistake, a means to pour forth all words couldn't describe. He looked beyond me into the flat. "Simply, it helps," I said. "Audrey, I don't." As I moved away, I said, "We both know why it ended." "I understand. You should see," he said, bringing out an envelope containing the signed divorce papers and other items. It contained a 30-year-old newspaper clipping about a young Helen Miller who was frantically attempting to establish her social standing before marrying into a wealthy family. Ryan remarked softly. "She was constantly terrified of losing control, of being shown to be inadequate. I now understand what she did, but I'm not condoning it. Understanding doesn't make it right. No, but it helps me not become her." Somewhere in the metropolis below, a siren screamed. Where I used to cringe at the sound, now it served as a reminder that life moves on, changes, and evolves. I told myself, I never wanted revenge, in shock at the reality. I just wanted to be free. "I understand. You won because of that." He started to walk away but stopped. "The picture. It's stunning." I opened the bundle of letters after he departed, and while my grandmother's words flowed across the pages, describing her strength, her courage to confront bullies, and her courage to choose integrity over retaliation, one piece, written shortly before her death, struck my attention. "Because they are afraid of their own darkness, some people will attempt to dull your light, dear heart. You have more power if you keep shining than if you resist them." Not every story needed a tidy ending, and sometimes victory wasn't in killing or even forgiving your enemies, but rather in finding who you truly were without them. I grabbed up my brush and added blue touches to the canvas. My phone buzzed once more, and Evan was inviting me to dinner. No date yet, but perhaps someday. For the time being, friendship was sufficient, and I had my freedom, my truth, and my work. In my previous life, I would have perceived danger in the shadows created by the flickering city lights, but now I see opportunities, patterns, and untold stories. The canvas was waiting, the night was young, and I picked up another brush. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely free, not because Helen had lost, not because I had won, but because I had finally understood the difference between emancipation and retribution. And I discovered who I was in that disparity. My parents gave my sister a brand new car for Christmas, leaving me with nothing. Until a winning lottery ticket changed everything. The peacefulness of Christmas morning was broken by the sound of laughter and delighted squeals coming up from our driveway. With my coffee mug warming my hands, I stood at the kitchen window and watched my younger sister Tessa hop up and down next to a brand new red Volkswagen Beetle that had a huge silver ribbon on top. With joy on their cheeks, my parents smiled as they gave her the keys. I'm Ella, and I recognized at this point that I would always be the underdog in my family's history. Through the glass, Tessa's voice could be heard. "Oh my God. I can't believe you guys did this." As if it were made of gold, she was already seated in the driver's seat and rubbing her hands over the steering wheel. I looked at my small Christmas presents to everyone, the pile of scratch-off lottery tickets on the counter. They had yet to bother opening them. After investing every available dollar in my culinary school applications, the tickets were the only thing I could afford. However, it would have been useless to try to explain that to my family. They had been rather explicit about what they thought of my pastime. I was shocked to hear my mother say, "Lay?" She was still wearing her coat when she stood in the doorway. "Why aren't you outside with everyone? Come see your sister's car." I made an effort to grin. "Just finishing my coffee, Mom?" With that typical expression of despair, she scowled. "You could try being happy for her, you know. This is a big moment." Before I could stop them, they blurted out, "Right. Because I'm the one who makes everything about myself." When she said, "Don't start. Not today." I watched her go back outside, biting my tongue. My father was demonstrating how Tessa should adjust her mirrors through the window. He was grinning proudly, which is something I never managed to achieve, not when I made the honor roll, when I won the regional cooking competition, or even when I was accepted to culinary school before they refused to cover my tuition. I found myself reaching for the lotto tickets. I began scratching out the numbers on one out of habit, not really noticing until I noticed 3 match digits. I double-checked the winning combinations, and my heart began beating. $50,000. With trembling palms, I gazed at the ticket. I could pay for culinary school with this money. I could begin constructing the restaurant of my dreams. At last, I could demonstrate to everyone the value of my pastime. However, this ticket was intended to be a present. Giving cash to them and seeing them celebrate another lucky break would be the appropriate thing to do. Cash would likely go into Tessa's education fund or a family vacation that I wouldn't be invited to. My folks chuckled as Tessa playfully honked the horn outside. They hadn't even realized I wasn't there. That's when I decided what to do. I folded the winning ticket carefully and put it in my pocket. I collected the remaining scratch-offs and disposed of them in the recycle bin. What they hadn't bothered to open, they wouldn't miss. "La!" a voice shouted from outside my father's house. "Get out here and take a family picture." As I approached the front door, I stopped and placed my hand on the handle. They were huddled around the automobile, their breath evident in the chilly December air, as I could see through the window. Without me, they appeared to be the ideal family of 3. "Coming," I returned the call. But I went upstairs to my room instead of joining them. Within an hour, I had the winning ticket in my wallet and a laptop open to apartment listings. Sometimes the finest form of retaliation is to leave rather than to get even. And I eventually had my chance because of their forgotten Christmas present. When I unlocked the door to my new flat, the key felt heavy in my hand. A studio above a downtown Thai restaurant wasn't much, but it was mine. My stomach rumbled in spite of everything as the scent of garlic and lemongrass rose through the floorboards. My phone was still blazing with missed calls from home 3 weeks after Christmas. My mother continued to text me, each one more filled with guilt than the last, even after I had left a letter stating that I needed space. "You're being selfish, Lila. Your sister needs you right now." After setting my duffel bag on the exposed mattress in the corner, I began unpacking the few culinary supplies I had packed, including a well-seasoned cast-iron pan, my knife roll, and the necessities. The winning lottery ticket, the funds already set aside for tuition at the culinary school, and the security deposit for this apartment were all securely deposited. I froze when I heard a knock on my door. Had they discovered me somehow? "Hello, new tenant?" It was a strange, highly accented voice. "I'm Marco, from downstairs." A tall man in chef's whites with his salt and pepper hair pulled back in a short ponytail was waiting for me as I opened the door. His blazer bore the moniker Executive Chef. He pointed to my boxes and remarked, "I noticed someone moving in. Wanted to introduce myself. We try to keep a family atmosphere here." I winced when I heard the word family, but his kind grin calmed me. He noticed the knife roll that was visible through my open door. "You cook?" he inquired as he followed my eyes. "I try to. I'm actually starting culinary school next month." His eyes glowed. "No kidding. We're short-staffed downstairs. Could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen, even part-time." My phone buzzed once more before I could reply. The name of my father appeared on the screen. Marco noticed my face and said, "Complicated situation? You could say that." He gave a contemplative nod. "Listen, come down tomorrow morning if you're interested. Sometimes the best therapy is keeping your hands busy and your knives sharp." I eventually listened to my father's voicemail after he departed. He spoke in a rough, irate tone. "Your mother's upset, and Tessa's grades are slipping. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Time to grow up and come home." After deleting the message, I launched my laptop and navigated to the website of the cooking school. Tuition for the first term was due the following week. I had my finger hovering over the submit payment button when Tessa sent me another text. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. Where are you? I'm worried." Compared to the others, this one hurt more. Even if Tessa and I didn't get along, she wasn't to blame for our parents' actions. But she had never been able to hide anything from our parents, so I couldn't risk giving her the truth. "I'm safe," I replied by typing. "Just need some time." I was in Marco's kitchen the following morning, slicing vegetables with more attention to detail than was necessary. The motion felt familiar and calming. Marco worked next to me, sometimes giving me technique advice. He remarked, "You have good instincts," as he observed me adjusting the heat beneath a boiling sauce. "But you're angry? It shows in your cooking. Is that a bad thing?" He gave a shrug. "Depends what you do with it. Anger can fuel passion or destroy it. The difference is in the control." My mother texted me again, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. I choose to disregard it. Marco went on, trying the sauce with a spoon. "The people who hurt us don't suffer when we let them consume our thoughts. They have no idea. We are the only ones that suffer." I reflected on my silent exit and the lottery ticket. They must occasionally realize that they cannot take people for granted. He gave me the spoon and said, "Maybe, but be careful that your desire for vengeance doesn't become your motivation. Try this." "What is absent?" Thinking, I took a taste of the sauce. "Salt, and perhaps a little acid." He grinned. "Exactly. In both life and cookery, balance is crucial." A server burst through the entrance of the kitchen. "Chef, a woman is outside inquiring about Ella, claims to be her mother." My heart stopped beating. I could see her looking around the dining room through the kitchen window, Tessa following her like a shadow. Marco gave me a curious glance. Silently, he said, "Back door through the alley. But keep in mind that you can't run indefinitely. You must eventually take a firm stance and serve the food you have cooked." I tied my apron as I nodded. The true test was deciding when to stay and fight, not when to flee. After 3 months of culinary school, I felt like I was finally settling in. I seldom had time to think about my family because of my early classes, afternoon jobs at Marco's restaurant, and late evenings designing my own future kitchen. That should have been my first clue that things were going to blow up in my face. As I was getting ready for dinner service, Amelia entered Marco's kitchen. Now a rising star chef at one of the city's best restaurants, my old friend from high school culinary club looked just like I remembered her. Pristine chef's whites, neatly combed hair, and that grin that never quite reached her eyes. She leaned on the prep table and muttered, "Lila Hawkins? I couldn't believe it, but I had heard reports that you were employed here. By now, shouldn't you be managing your own business?" "I'm still learning," I said, continuing to cut vegetables in the steady pattern Marco had shown me. Not all of us were supported by our parents while attending Le Cordon Bleu. "Talking about parents," she added, taking out her phone and browsing through some content. "Last week, I met your mother at the charity dinner. She appeared concerned about you." My finger almost got caught as my knife slipped. "You spoke with my mom? She made a comment about you stealing money and fleeing. Theatrical, even for you." Suddenly, the kitchen felt too small and too hot. "That wasn't the case." "No." Her eyebrows went up. I know you've been looking at restaurant business plans since I also heard from several investors. Considering that, the timing is intriguing. Now my hands trembled. Amelia, what do you want? Want? All I'm worried about is my old acquaintance. You know, it takes more than simply money to open a business. It requires reputation, relationships, and stability. She underlined the final point. It would be unfortunate if prospective investors were aware of rumors regarding the true source of your startup funding. Marco's voice exploded from the doorway before I could reply. Is everything in here all right? Amelia's smile became incredibly sweet. Just catching up with a friend from long ago. Chef Marco, I actually came to discuss business. Next month, my restaurant will host a pop-up event with up-and-coming talented artists. Lay's participation would be greatly appreciated. Marco glanced at me, but I was unable to look him in the eye. Decisively, I'll let her think about it, he stated. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have service to prepare for. I tried to stabilize myself by holding onto the side of the prep table when Amelia left. I muttered, she's going to tell everyone. The investors, my family. Under his breath, Marco said, tell them what? I told him everything, including the lottery ticket, my escape, and the meticulously planned plans that were now in danger of failing. He gave me a towel to wipe my hands after listening to me without passing judgment. His words were, so now you have a choice. You can run again, or you can face this head on. How? She'll destroy everything I've worked for. He took my knife and tested its sharpness, asking, will she? Or will she just expose what you've been afraid to face? Sometimes our biggest fears are just shadows, Ella. They disappear when we shine a light on them. A text message from an unidentified number rang on my phone. It was a screen grab of an email sent to possible investors, most likely by Amelia. It went into detail regarding my family problems and money irregularities. The pop-up event, Marco said, could be an opportunity. Show everyone, Amelia, your family, these investors, exactly who you are and what you can do. Or it could be a trap. He grinned. Most likely both. But you're not that scared girl from Christmas morning anymore. You've learned more than just cooking techniques in my kitchen. I reflected on the previous 3 months, including the cuts, burns, and late hours spent honing recipes. With every minor triumph, I developed something beyond my culinary abilities. What's that saying you always use? I responded. The hottest fires make the strongest steel. He gave a nod. And you, my dear, are about to walk through fire. I grabbed up my knife and started chopping again, making deliberate, accurate cuts. Amelia believed she could exploit my past to ruin my future, but she had overlooked the most crucial culinary rule. Time is everything. Tell her I'm in, I responded, for the pop-up event. But I'm doing it my way. Marco grinned knowingly. Now that sounds like a chef talking. At 3 a.m, Tessa sent the following text. Can you meet me? Please don't tell Mom and Dad. Her eyes were red and swollen when I spotted her seated in her Volkswagen Beetle outside Marco's restaurant. Her normally flawless hair was pulled back in an untidy ponytail, and she had lost weight since Christmas. She replied, I failed 2 classes, as I got into the passenger seat. And I can't tell them? They think I'm applying to pre-med programs, but I haven't even started the applications. The quiet between us was filled by the gentle hum of the heater. This vehicle had represented every issue with our family's dynamic. It was like a confession booth now. Even though I already knew the answer, I questioned, why pre-med? My personal nightmare. Mom's backup plan, Dad's dream. She laughed, but her voice sounded more like a sob. How do you do it, Lai? Just walk away from their expectations? I reflected about Amelia's threats, the lottery ticket concealed in my apartment, and all the lies entangled in my purported bravery. I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask about making good choices right now. At least you made a choice. She reached into her jacket and took out a crumpled piece of paper. I found this in Mom's study. It was a list. My movements were monitored. Notes of folks she'd spoken to in town. Tessa stated, she is aware of the culinary school. I felt sick to my stomach. Does she know about the money? Not yet, but she's obsessed with figuring out how you're paying for everything, she said. She thinks you're involved in something illegal. Dad's talking about hiring a private investigator. I didn't miss the irony. I had given them even more justification to meddle in my affairs by attempting to break free from their authority. There's more. Go on, Tessa. I overheard Mom talking to Amelia Stone's mother at the country club. They're planning something for that pop-up event, some kind of intervention or confrontation. They want to save you from yourself or whatever. I balled my hands into fists. Amelia would involve our mothers, of course. She was an expert at twisting the knife. Whispering, "You should tell them the truth," Tessa whispered. "About everything. Like you're telling them the truth about pre-med?" She winced, and I instantly felt bad about what I had said. Both of us were imprisoned in distinct iterations of the same cage. "Maybe," Tessa said hesitantly. "Maybe we could help each other. I could come to your pop-up event, run interference with Mom, and you could help me figure out how to tell them about changing my major." "To what?" "Photography," she confessed, displaying a collection of gorgeous culinary photographs on her phone. "I've been practicing at restaurants around town. That's actually how I found out where you were working." The photographs were stunning, capturing the soul of each dish through the play of light and shadow. Their strict, meticulous approach to everything was quite different from our mother's. "These are incredible, Tess." "Really?" "Because sometimes I think I'm just being stupid and selfish, throwing away a real career for something you love," I said at the conclusion. "Yeah, I know that feeling." We were swept by the headlights of a passing automobile. I briefly caught a glimpse of us as sisters fleeing the same darkness, but in opposite directions. "I have to be at the restaurant in 3 hours, I replied. "Want to come in? I could teach you some plating techniques. Give you something interesting to photograph." She grinned, but it wasn't the flawless smile she gave our parents. "I'd like that." I became aware that something had changed when we entered Marco's kitchen. My quest for vengeance has evolved beyond simply disproving my parents. It was about ending a cycle and making room for Tessa and me to be different from what our parents wanted us to be. I had to make it through Amelia's pop-up event first, though. The stakes were bigger than ever now that we knew our mothers were engaged. My future was no longer the only consideration here. Tessa's was also at issue. I said, "Hey," and gave her an apron. "Want to learn how to make Mom's favorite dessert? I have some ideas for improving it." Tessa smiled mischievously. "Now that sounds like a photo opportunity." 3 days before the pop-up event, everything began to go wrong. While I was finishing up my menu in Marco's kitchen, Tessa stormed in the back door with her phone in her hand. She threw the screen at me and said, "You need to see this?" It was a gorgeously presented dish from Amelia's Instagram story that looked just like my go-to recipe. The one I had spent months creating. "A sneak peek of our upcoming showcase," was the caption. "The greatest inventions can occasionally be found in unlikely locations." I wiped my trembling hands on my apron. "She's been watching me. Someone's been feeding her information." After saying, "That's not all," Tessa swiped to another post. It was a set of pictures taken at Amelia's restaurant during a private investor meeting. One photo had my mother sitting at the table with her face animated in discussion in the background. The cutting board clattered against the knife I was holding. "She's working with Mom?" "I overheard them yesterday," Tessa acknowledged. "Mom's been telling potential investors about your unstable behavior and questionable finances. They're trying to make sure no one backs your restaurant plans." Marco showed up next to us, looking serious. "The health inspector just called. Someone filed multiple complaints about our kitchen. They're coming tomorrow, right before your big prep day." There was a reason for the timing. Amelia was skilled at using my own mother as a weapon to harm me. I clutched the edge of the prep table as the room began to spin. "I can't do this," I said. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm in over my head." Tessa's voice was stern as she said, "No. That's exactly what they want you to think. But look at this." She showed me pictures she had taken during our late-night cooking sessions by pulling up her camera roll. The photographs were breathtaking, showcasing not only the cuisine but also the love and imagination that went into each dish. "This is who you are, Elia. Not their lies. Not their manipulation." Marco, as he often did when he was making a point, picked up my fallen knife and tested its edge. "You know what separates a good chef from a great one? Not talent, not even creativity. It's what they do when everything goes wrong." "But she stole my recipe." He gave me the knife and said, "So make a better one. Show them who you really are, not who they think you are." As I gazed at the knife in my palm, I recalled all the evenings I had spent honing my cuts, all the burns and scars I had acquired via perseverance rather than innate skill. Amelia may have taken my recipe, but she was unable to take away my enthusiasm. "How skilled are you at social media marketing, Tessa?" I said gently. She smiled. "Better than Amelia, that's for sure." "Good, because I have an idea." I looked across at Marco. "Remember that fusion dish we talked about? The one that combines Mom's traditional family recipe with modern techniques?" His face lit up with a smile as he nodded. "The one that's too risky? Too controversial?" "Exactly. Amelia wants to play it safe, stick to stolen classics. Let's give them something they can't copy. Something that tells our whole story on a plate. I recreated my mother's signature dish over the course of the following few hours, changing every component. My childhood comfort food was transformed into something fresh that evoked both tradition and defiance. Every step was recorded by Tessa, who used her camera to record the transition from the old to the new. Even Marco appeared impressed when the last meal was prepared. His words, "This isn't just food. This is your Declaration of Independence." Tessa captioned the pictures simply when she uploaded them. Some recipes are passed down. Others are transformed. Coming soon to at Amelia Stone Showcase event. The post went viral in the local food community within a few hours. Amelia texted after making 2 calls. "You're making a mistake. Back down now or everything comes out, about the money, about your family, everything." For the first time that day, my hand was steady as I handed Tessa and Marco the text. When I said, "Let it come out, I'm done hiding," Marco gave a nod of approval. "Now you're cooking with fire." Tessa responded, "Just promise me one thing." As she lowered her camera. "When you face them, all of them, let me be there. Someone needs to document what happens when the golden child and the black sheep finally stand together." Retaliation and self-promotion were no longer the exclusive goals of the pop-up event. It was about finally writing my own life recipe and escaping all the ones that others had created. With the subtlety of a cooking fire, the pop-up event's night arrived. Other young cooks were vying for the interest of possible investors as I stood in Amelia's prep kitchen. My burners were inexplicably becoming cold, and my station had been accidentally positioned near to a drafty service door. "Equipment issues?" Amelia asked as she went past, her voice brimming with fictitious worry. Such a shame. But then, working with subpar tools builds character, doesn't it? I tried not to notice that she had placed my mother at a prominent table right in front of me, so I focused on my preparations. Evelyn Hawkins wore her critical face like a crown as she sat there like a queen at court. Someone shouted, 10 minutes to first service?" I grabbed for my sauce with trembling hands, only to discover that the container was empty. Only a few minutes ago, I had filled it and had turned my back. "Looking for something?" Amelia produced a well-known container. "Oh, this?" "Found it by the sink. Looked spoiled, so I tossed it. Health and safety, you know?" In a flash, 3 months of labor were gone. Recalling Marco's remarks about maintaining control under duress, I held my knife so tightly that my knuckles turned white. However, this was deliberate devastation rather than merely pressure. L.A. With her camera in hand, Tessa showed up at my station. "Mom's talking to the investors. She's showing them something on her phone." I felt sick to my stomach. I could see my mother making impassioned gestures through the service window, and the investors' expressions were getting serious as they turned to face me. With a shake of his head, one of them got up and left. Tessa muttered, "It's the lottery ticket. They know." The room began to swirl. Every cautious step I had taken toward freedom, everything I had created, was falling apart. No financiers. No sauce. There is no hope. Through my panic, a voice said, "Chef Hawkins? Health Department. We need to discuss some concerning allegations about your food handling practices." Naturally. The icing on the cake. I glanced around the kitchen, taking in my mother's contented grin, Amelia's victorious smile, and the other chef's adamant avoidance of eye contact. This was the feeling of complete defeat. "I'm done," I muttered as I tied my apron. "They win." Tessa grabbed my arm and said, "No. Remember what you told me about Mom's recipe, about making it your own? So your sauce is gone. Make something better. Something they can't steal or destroy." "With what?" "I have nothing left." She took out her phone and showed me the pictures she had shot of our late-night cooking sessions, saying, "You have me?" At the final picture, she paused. Marco and I were in the kitchen, giggling as I tried a failed dish that had unintentionally become something fantastic and completely different. Marco had remarked that evening that sometimes the best dishes come from disasters. I glanced at the essential elements that were still there, at my almost empty station, at my sister's resolute countenance, and then at my mother, who was now approaching us with that well-known look of disappointment. She began. "This has gone far enough. It's time to—" "You're right," I interrupted, grabbing my knife. "It has gone far enough. Tessa, start filming." Amelia shouted, "What are you doing?" As I started slicing the few items I had left quickly. "I'm cooking," I declared, my knife moving deliberately. "But not your way, or Mom's way, or anyone else's way. My way." The service was 20 minutes away. No sauce, No financiers, no assistants, just my trembling hands and my sister's camera. Maybe it was the intention, but all I had planned was in ruins. Perhaps in order to discover what I truly needed, I had to let go of everything I believed I desired. Last call for plating, was said by someone. I gazed at my creation, honest, straightforward, the product of defiance and despair. It wasn't flawless. I hadn't even planned for it. However, it was truly mine. With her camera trained on my hands, Tessa questioned, "Ready?" I took the first plate and nodded. I could see my mother and the other investors waiting through the service window. This was my final opportunity to demonstrate that the greatest works can occasionally emerge from the darkest situations. After saying, "Time to serve," I pushed through the door. And I hope they're hungry for the truth. It was so quiet in the dining room when I served my homemade dish. I observed the investors leaning forward through Tessa's camera, their faces changing from doubt to interest. My mother's hands showed her anxiety by twisting her napkin under the table, but her face stayed purposefully expressionless. One investor examined the plate and remarked, "This isn't what was advertised." "No," I concurred. "It's better." This is what happens when someone tries to sabotage your carefully planned menu. You either give up, or you create something new. Amelia came out of the kitchen and I met her gaze. I turned to Amelia and asked, "Would you like to explain why my original sauce disappeared? Or should we ask my mother about the convenient timing of the health inspector's visit?" My mother said sharply, "Li," as a warning. However, I wasn't done yet. "It's funny, Mom. I tried to replicate your recipes for years in an attempt to win your approval, but tonight, when everything was taken away, I finally got it. Real hunger produces the best food. For recognition as much as for food. For approval." Now that the investors were trying the meal, their appreciative mutterings were becoming more audible and Tessa walked around the table, recording their responses, the way they nodded their heads and raised their eyebrows at one another. The principal investor remarked, "The combination of traditional and modern techniques is unexpected. The harmony of flavors. It narrates a tale." "That's because it's my narrative," I responded, "the genuine one, not the one they wanted to share. About creating something out of nothing. About converting rejection into motivation." With her poise crumbling, Amelia went forward and said, "You think you're so special? A tenacious underdog who—" "No," I said, "I believe that I am just what you fear. Someone who no longer need your approval. Any one of you." I hadn't seen my father since Christmas morning, so his arrival was a shock to the room as he entered and stopped short at the scene in front of him. "What's happening?" he insisted. "Your daughter," the principal investor stated, "is going to get an offer of support for her restaurant idea. If she's interested, that is." My father's expression changed from one of bewilderment to something I had never seen before, perhaps recognition or regret. "The lottery ticket," he replied softly. "Isn't that how you accomplished all of this?" "The Christmas present you gave us," I said. "The one you never bothered to open." And I said, "Yes." Suddenly my mother got up and said, "You had no right to—" "Mom, to what?" "To want something different than what you planned?" I yelled. "To be successful without your consent?" "You should ask your golden child how she feels about medical school," I said, gesturing to Tessa, who was still shooting. "Find out what she truly wants to accomplish with her life." All eyes shifted to Tessa, and the room fell silent once again as she dropped her camera, her hands calm despite her trembling voice. "I want to be a photographer," she said. "And Liz going to hire me to shoot for her restaurant's marketing." "No one is being hired by you." "This was a publicity stunt," Amelia yelled. The main investor stepped in and said, "These investors are very impressed, Miss Hawkins, both with the food and with how you handled unexpected challenges." My father came up and reached into his jacket, taking out a wrinkled, still unscratched scratch-off ticket that I had given him for Christmas. "I don't know why, but I kept it," he remarked. "If it's okay with you, I'd like to scratch it right now. Perhaps because that was the last thing you gave us before." He cleared his throat. "And I would like to invest money in your restaurant, regardless of its value." "Hey, Roger," my mom objected. However, he raised his hand and said, "No, Evelyn. We've already caused enough harm by attempting to dictate their lives. Take a look at what Ella produced tonight, despite all the odds being against her. Take a look at Tessa's images. We weren't afraid of these failures. They are artists." "I think we have some details to discuss, Miss Hawkins," said the principal investor, grinning and passing a business card across the table. "Every one of us." I looked at my father's unscratched ticket after picking up the card. "Keep it," I replied. "Some gifts are worth more unopened." I was too absorbed staring at my father's face when he finally saw me, not as a letdown, but as a chef, as myself, to observe Amelia storming away. I turned to the investors and said, "So, let's talk about opening night." The restaurant was packed, as it had been every night since it opened, and I was standing in my own kitchen, 6 months after the pop-up event, watching the dinner service unfold through the pass. The walls were covered in Tessa's photos, which included candid candids of our family's adventure as well as beautiful views of our hallmark dishes. Marco entered with a familiar envelope as the door slid open. He handed it to me and said, "Special delivery. Found this at my restaurant." Amelia's was the return address, and there was only one page inside. "Last week, I shut down my restaurant. It turns out that building success on other people's formulas isn't worth much. You were correct. You must be the one who is hungry." As I folded the letter, I reflected on how, somewhere down the line, revenge had lost its appeal. "Have you watched the special today?" I nodded toward a meal that was waiting at the pass as I asked Marco. He grinned when he saw my mother's famous recipe, modified but still hearty. "What was her reaction?" "She cried," I said. Then spent an hour telling me everything I'd done wrong while secretly eating every bite. I could see my family at their usual table through the kitchen window. My mother sat straight-backed as usual, but her eyes kept wandering to the kitchen with what appeared to be pride, and my father was showing Tessa something on her camera, presumably talking about her upcoming gallery show. My line cook said, "Chef, we have a situation." At the kitchen entrance, I turned to see a familiar face, Amelia, who appeared smaller and less assured. She blurted out, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I wanted to know if prep cooks are still being hired by you." I would have cherished this moment of defeat 6 months ago, but now, when I looked at her, I saw part of myself. That same hunger, just focused in the wrong direction for too long. The kitchen was silent, and everyone watched to see how I would respond. I said, "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., and be on time. Additionally, this time, Amelia, bring your own recipes." With a look of relief on her face, she nodded and rushed out. "You're not the same chef who burned with revenge in my kitchen," Marco said, giving me a shoulder squeeze. "No," I said. "I feel better now." Speaking of which, I took out the lottery ticket that my father had returned to me last week, stating that certain presents needed to be completed. He had kept it unscratched for months. "Do you want to take the lead?" I extended an offer to Marco. "Some things are worth more unscratched," he said, shaking his head. "Sometimes we learn more from the wonder of what might have been than from knowledge." I tucked the ticket under my chef's coat, where it lay close to my heart as a reminder of how far I'd come, while the dinner rush was intensifying and tickets were pouring in. "Lay. Mom is criticizing your plating once more." Tessa called from the dining room. "Tell her if she wants to reorganize my garnishes, she'll have to put on an apron and do it herself," I said, laughing and grabbing my knife. My mother surprised me by showing up at the kitchen doorway a few moments later, already rolling up her sleeves. "Well," she remarked, "would you demonstrate for me how this updated version of my recipe functions?" I gave her an apron and watched as she tied it using motions that were similar to mine. I learned that some wounds heal slowly, but that they do, especially when they are seasoned with time, truth, and a little bit of forgiveness. Making room at my station, I said, "Okay, Mom. Let me show you how hunger enhances the flavor of everything." A cacophony of sizzling pans, clicking dishes, and calling tickets filled the kitchen as it hummed around us. My rules, my restaurant, and my family, the one I was born into and the one I created, are all mine, no matter how imperfect. Additionally, an unscratched ticket in my chef's coat served as a reminder that sometimes the finest form of retaliation isn't providing cold food but rather inviting your adversaries to a warm table and teaching them how to prepare meals for themselves. I took back my house and left my mother homeless after she disowned me for not attending my sister's wedding. Hey Reddit, my mom's favorite was always clear when I was growing up. My younger sister Rachel, 37F, and I, 42F, are the children of my mother, Karen, 62F. It seemed as though I had vanished from the world the instant Rachel was born. I don't want to come across as theatrical, but this is the reality. My mother was naturally quite protective of Rachel because she was born underweight and ill. I get that it must have been frightening for her to have a sick kid, but Rachel was the only child that Karen cared for, rather than merely the family's baby. Rachel received royal treatment. Her needs, wants, and moods were the center of attention. For example, Mom would hand-feed Rachel until she was well into middle school since she disliked eating by herself. Mom would simply complete any school projects or homework for Rachel. No questions asked, Mom allowed Rachel to stay at home if she didn't feel like going to school. And then there was me. I had clothes, food, and other essentials, so I wasn't completely disregarded, but I was alone emotionally. Unless it had to do with Rachel, Mom never truly cared about me. Mom was preoccupied at a spa and forgot about a dentist appointment I had when I was around 10 years old. After hours of waiting outside the school, a family friend saw me and offered to drive me home. My mother pretended it wasn't a huge thing when I returned. "Oh, I thought you'd figure it out," she simply said. The only person who actually saw me was my father, Michael. May he rest in peace. He wasn't home as much as I would have liked because he worked so much, but when he was, he tried his best. When Karen and Rachel weren't there, Dad and I would go out for movies or ice cream. He would give me extra cash for birthdays or school outings, but he would urge me not to tell my mother. In retrospect, I believe he was attempting to compensate me for feeling so unnoticed. But Dad could not deny the favoritism no matter how hard he tried. Everything was always better for Rachel. I had to save money or work for what I desired. Rachel, however, only needed to ask, and it would materialize. I requested a bike one Christmas, and Rachel made a last-minute request for the same item. Rachel received a brand new, gleaming bike beneath the tree on Christmas morning. I received some socks. "You're older," Mom responded when I inquired why. "You can get one for yourself by saving money." However, it was more than just material possessions. Rachel's happiness was Karen's obsession. Mom would move quickly to resolve whatever small problem Rachel was having, such as a friend not texting her back or receiving a poor grade. I quickly learned not to bother going to her for anything, though, as she would tell me to stop being so dramatic, or figure it out like an adult, whenever I was upset about something. Of course Rachel took it all in. Why wouldn't she? She was living the dream since Mom took care of everything for her, so she didn't have to do anything. Rachel eventually stopped learning even the most fundamental life skills. She was incapable of managing her own schedule, cooking, or even cleaning. Rachel was totally reliant on her mother since she protected her from everything. I didn't know how toxic the dynamic was until high school. Mom would complete Rachel's schoolwork after she would sob to her about how difficult her lessons were. Mom pleaded with the principal to have Rachel's grades modified after she failed high school, accusing the teachers of failing to recognize her unique needs. Naturally, it didn't succeed, but it demonstrated the lengths Karen will go to in order to shield Rachel from responsibility of any kind. However, I was supposed to be self-sufficient. I had to work things out on my own if I had trouble in school. I had to use the money I earned from babysitting if I wanted to participate in extracurricular activities. And Karen would tell me, "You're the older sister. You need to set an example," if I ever ventured to voice my displeasure. I was eager to be out of high school by the time I graduated. I never looked back after enrolling at a college in a different city. I never made a better choice than to move away. I was able to breathe for the first time. I didn't have to compete for Karen's attention or continually compare myself to Rachel. I might simply be myself. Rachel, meanwhile, remained at home and didn't leave until she was 26 years old and married. Karen continued to be involved in her life even at that point, phoning her 5 times a day to inquire about topics like, "What did you eat?" or "How is your hubby doing?" She even unexpectedly came up to bring Rachel groceries or clean her house, even though Rachel and her husband were more than capable of handling those tasks on their own. For my part, I was going about my life. I obtained a job after graduating from college and began constructing my future. Dad kept in touch with me by giving me frequent phone calls and coming to see me when he could. Not so much Karen. She would occasionally comment on my Facebook posts or send me a birthday text, but that was about it. I honestly didn't give a damn. Her unrelenting criticism and partiality no longer burdened me, and I was joyful. In hindsight, I believe Karen's fixation on Rachel stemmed from a desire for control. She never allowed Rachel to grow up because she wanted her to always be in need of her. I had to fend for myself after being thrown out of the nest early. Although it was painful at the time, I now consider it a blessing. While Rachel became totally dependent on Karen, I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. The dynamic remained the same even after I left. Karen was Rachel's facilitator, I was the forgotten child, and Rachel was the golden child. Some things never change, which is humorous. Not funny haha, but funny in a depressing manner. But everything did 11 years ago. At first, Dad's frequent coughing didn't seem like a huge concern. He blamed it on a recalcitrant cold or allergies. However, he didn't get better as the weeks stretched into months. He actually grew worse. He was usually exhausted, breathless, and simply not himself. Nevertheless, he continued to labor because he was a selfless, industrious man who always put the needs of others before his own. Karen didn't appear to notice at all. She was too preoccupied with her daily schedule of yoga sessions, spa visits, and whatever else occupied her time. After her first marriage ended, Rachel was back at home by that point. She didn't appear to be really worried about Dad's health, and she wasn't working either. They seemed unwilling to face the inconvenience of admitting that something was amiss. I was trying to keep some distance from all the family dysfunction while establishing my career in a distant place. During our frequent phone conversations, I could sense that something wasn't right. He sounded more worn out and weaker. He dismissed my question about whether he had seen a doctor, claiming to be all right. I knew he wasn't, though. When he eventually went to the hospital following an especially severe coughing spell, things reached a breaking point. A serious lung infection was the diagnosis. When I learned, I immediately dropped everything and ran home. I was appalled when I arrived. Dad was laying in bed by himself, looking so weak and ill. Rachel and Karen? They were out getting manicures. Karen pretended to be shocked to see me when they returned. She even attempted to give me a hug, but I refused. When I questioned her why she wasn't with Dad, she said that she had errands to run. Both had recently had their nails done and were carrying shopping bags, so it was clear they had just left the spa. I spent as much time as I could with Dad when he was admitted to the hospital. Every now and then, Karen would stop by, but only for a few minutes. Rachel? She said it was too hard for her to see him in that state, and she hardly turned there at all. I was balancing everything at the same time, including communicating with doctors, controlling his medicine, and attempting to make him comfortable. On most nights, I even slept in a chair by his bed. It was frustrating that Karen didn't participate. It's not like she was too busy to be there because she didn't work. However, she pretended that going to the hospital was a huge hassle. The day she stated, "He's in good hands with the nurses," will always stick in my memory. Should I just sit there, or what? Yes, Karen, supporting your husband is exactly what you're meant to do. Dad was released from the hospital after a week. We hired a nurse to assist at home because he still required round-the-clock care. Karen was expected to take charge and assume greater responsibilities, yet she continued to be untrustworthy. She would leave for hours to run errands, only to return with shopping bags, or she would fail to give him his medications on time. On one occasion, she chose to stop at the salon before picking up an oxygen tank for him. I had already made arrangements for someone else to deliver it by the time she arrived home. Rachel wasn't any better. She said she avoided Dad completely because she couldn't bear to see him in such a vulnerable state. She spent much of her time in her room watching TV or browsing on her phone. She even went on vacation with her friends during one of Dad's worst bouts, leaving me to manage everything by myself. In the end, I resigned my job to care for Dad full-time. To be honest, I didn't want to leave him alone with Karen or Rachel, and I didn't trust them to do it. He was worthy of better. In order to keep him from feeling lonely, I prepared his meals, assisted him with his physical therapy, and made sure he had company. I loved him, so even though it was exhausting, I would do it all over again if I had to. As Dad's health deteriorated, Karen did make an attempt to work harder, but it was too late. She would sit next to him, but she would be glued to her phone, either talking to Rachel or posting on social media. It seemed as though she was unable to fully focus on him. Rachel only arrived after being coerced by Karen, and even then, she would excuse herself and depart after a short while. A few months later, Dad died. The nurse, I, and a few of his friends who had come to bid him farewell were all around him. Rachel and Karen. They weren't present. Rachel was out with friends, and Karen had gone to some sort of wellness retreat. When it became apparent that Dad was running low on time, I contacted both of them, but they did not answer. The funeral went by quickly. I was tired and heartbroken, but I still had to put up with the bullshit from Rachel and Karen. As though she hadn't been ignoring all the warning signals for months, Karen talked to her friends about how unexpected Dad's death was for the majority of the funeral. Rachel made a huge show of crying, but it felt so forced. She hadn't given a damn when it counted. Dad's attorney called me a few weeks after the funeral to discuss his will. I was hoping for a tiny inheritance or a memento, but nothing more. However, I was taken aback when I met with the attorney. Dad had bequeathed the house, his savings, and his assets to me. Rachel and Karen received nothing. Given how little his wife and youngest daughter cared for him, I could only imagine how much anguish Dad must have been going through in his last months. He expressed his appreciation for everything I'd done for him by leaving everything to me. It caused a firestorm, though. When Karen and Rachel learned, they were furious. In fact, Rachel yelled at the attorney, stating that she could never be subjected to this treatment by her father. Karen called and insisted that I give them a piece of the inheritance. I declined. For the sake of my sanity, I disconnected from Rachel and Karen. Their sense of entitlement was draining. I eventually met my husband after relocating to the city where I was employed and concentrating on starting again. We relocated abroad for his work, got married, and had a baby. To be honest, I didn't feel the need to tell Karen or Rachel about it because it was a new beginning. After a few years, I became a mother to my daughter. Karen appeared at my place out of the blue. It was unexpected to see her at my door as I hadn't spoken to her in years. She appeared more worn out and less put together. She sobbed, expressed regret, and expressed her want to be involved in my daughter's life. She even acknowledged that she felt bad about the way she raised me. She said she just wanted to make amends because she had been living with remorse ever since Dad died. Although I must admit that I didn't trust her, I chose to give her a chance. It was all right for a time. Karen would occasionally send gifts and make video calls to see how my daughter was doing. For once it felt normal. Then, predictably, the hints began. I thought it would go away, so I disregarded Karen when she casually said how hard life had been for her since I took everything, or how she was having financial difficulties. Karen gave me a call around a month ago. The fact that she seemed enthusiastic made me uneasy right away because Karen doesn't call unless she needs something. She struck up a discussion by inquiring about my spouse and daughter, which was already strange. Then she revealed the shocking news that Rachel was getting married once more. As you recall, Rachel's first marriage ended almost a year later. She never really put her life back on track after moving back in with Karen. Rachel and I hadn't spoken for more than 10 years, so this news was unexpected. Karen talked endlessly on Rachel's significance of this wedding, how it was a new beginning for her, and how pleased the family would be. I congratulated her, was courteous, and assumed that was the end of it. But obviously not. Karen went on to say something like, "You know, Rachel has had a really difficult time organizing this wedding within her budget. After everything she's been through, she deserves a lovely day." I knew where this was going, so I said nothing. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. To begin with, Rachel and I don't even communicate. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to backtrack when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no. I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen were behaving as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this? I asked her. What did she say? "You were what we needed." That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. "You already treated me like I didn't exist," I responded, laughing. "What makes a difference?" I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were. Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished." I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, it would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality, though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They didn't try to patch things up between them. I finally came to the conclusion that enough was enough. I needed to reclaim what was properly mine since they had stayed too long. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. I don't even speak to Rachel, to start. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course, you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to retract her statement when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no, I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen behaved as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this? I asked her. What did she say? "You were what we needed." That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. "You already treated me like I didn't exist," I responded, laughing. "What makes a difference?" I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were." Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished. I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, it would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality, though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They certainly enjoyed living in a house they didn't pay for, but they didn't try to patch things up. After Karen's absurd request that I cover Rachel's wedding costs and the constant attempts at manipulation, I finally had enough. I had an eviction notice prepared after I called my attorney. Karen went insane when she got it. "You can't evict me," she yelled when she called me. "I call this place home. I've spent 45 years here." I politely told her that she had 30 days to leave the house and that it was legally mine. Naturally, Rachel threw herself into the conflict. She accused me of being greedy and callous, calling me every possible insult in the book. "I just cared about Dad to get the inheritance," she said. It was absurd. I'm the terrible guy, even though she was the one who hardly ever saw Dad while he was dying. Karen did everything she could to get me to reconsider. She pretended to be tough at first, adding, "I dare you to kick me out." She then softened, saying that the house was all she had left and that she was too old to start again. "I'm not going anywhere." As if it wasn't the place I should have been collecting rent on for years, she even sobbed about how she had been renting out a room to make ends meet. It didn't work. Her attempt to guilt-trip me by asking, "What would your dad think if he saw you throwing your mother out on the street?" was the last straw. "Dad left me the house for a reason," I explained to her. "Perhaps he would still be alive if you had given him even half the attention you gave to spa sessions." I realized that was harsh, but I had had enough of sugarcoating things. Karen had to deal with the repercussions of her decisions. The eviction wasn't warmly received by Rachel either. She made a huge deal out of telling Karen to temporarily move in with her. She boasted to every one of her relatives over the phone that she was supporting Karen and that she didn't require anything from me. She seemed to want a round of applause for performing the absolute minimum, and it was all very performative. On the 26th day of the 30-day notice period, Karen left. I didn't even make an effort to appear. To oversee the transition, I engaged a property manager. I had the house refurbished and cleaned after it was vacant. I made the trusting decision to rent it to the brother of a family friend. Knowing that the house would eventually be occupied by individuals who valued it was a pleasant feeling. In the meantime, because I wouldn't pay, Rachel's elaborate wedding plans fell through. She was forced to move from an elegant lakefront location to a municipal hall. It seems that this embarrassed a number of people in their social circle, and Rachel's fiancé wasn't pleased either. He didn't even want a large wedding, it turns out. Shortly after Karen moved in with Rachel, I began to hear rumors of trouble in paradise because Rachel had assured him she would find a way to pay for it, which was obviously code for "my sister will pay." Having his mother-in-law as a frequent visitor to the residence did not sit well with Rachel's husband. As usual, Karen felt compelled to interfere in their lives. She would make fun of Rachel's cooking, or remark on how Rachel's husband managed the house, and overall be a pain in the neck. Some family members have attempted to use guilt-tripping to get me to forgive Rachel and Karen. They insist that I should have allowed Karen to remain in the house and that I have gone too far. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I don't care about these people's thoughts anymore because they remained silent when I was being tormented. Let's go on to the final update now. I believed that I would finally be at peace after Karen moved in with Rachel. I cut off most of the toxic relatives who tried to guilt-trip me into forgiving Karen and Rachel, rented out the house, and concentrated on my family. I must admit that I was relieved when I didn't hear from them for a time. Naturally, though, that didn't last. I received a contact from a mutual relative inquiring whether I had heard anything about Karen and Rachel's situation around 2 months after the eviction. I hadn't, and I wasn't sure I cared, to be honest. But I had to ask since I was so curious. They told me things that were both frustrating and, dare I say it, gratifying. Chris, Rachel's husband, apparently had enough of Karen's interference and issued Rachel a final ultimatum: either she leaves or I leave. Due to the wedding fiasco, Rachel was already at odds with him. Do you recall that she had promised him a lavish wedding, which I was supposed to pay for? Rachel felt ashamed in front of her friends and his family when they were forced to settle for a modest town hall ceremony when things didn't work out. There was a lot of friction in their relationship as a result of her disregarding Chris's warnings not to overextend financially. Things only got worse when Karen moved into their house. Chris's cuisine, his parenting skills, they have a toddler, and even his communication with Rachel were all criticized by Karen. Ironically, given her own financial mess, she would advise them on how to handle their money. For a while, Chris tried to put up with it, but after one very heated argument in which Karen accused him of not being man enough to care for his family, he told Rachel that it was either him or Karen. Rachel pleaded with him to change his mind, but he refused. The worst part is that Karen didn't go out in silence. She lost it when Rachel informed her of Chris's ultimatum. She also threatened to remove Rachel from her will, which was a pointless threat given that Karen had nothing to leave behind, and accused Rachel of abandoning her like everyone else. After they got into a heated dispute, Rachel, who was probably embarrassed and upset, advised Karen to work it out on her own. Where has Karen disappeared to? Not surprisingly, she made an attempt to get in touch with me. She asked me if I would think about allowing her to return to the house via email. Yes, an email, as I had blocked her on all other platforms. She wrote on how harsh life had been to her and how, as a mother, she had always tried her hardest. She even attempted to present it as a chance for us to mend and re-establish our bond. I didn't even think to answer. Her deceptive strategies were now just depressing. Karen attempted to use guilt-tripping to persuade some extended family members to take her in after I failed to respond. The majority of them flatly refused, most likely due to their observation of her methods. A distant cousin consented to let Karen stay for a short while, but she was asked to leave after just 3 weeks. Evidently, the cousin had had enough of her persistent complaints and demanding demeanor. Rachel is currently coping with the consequences of her choices. Although Chris stayed with her, their relationship is apparently in very bad shape. Chris has been withdrawing both financially and emotionally as a result of the wedding costs, Karen's turmoil, and Rachel's inability to accept responsibility for anything. Rachel has been telling everyone that he, not her, is the issue, even though he even recommended couples counseling. According to what I've heard, Rachel has been complaining to her family about how unfair it is that Dad gave me everything. She said that none of this would have occurred if I had simply divided the inheritance. She intentionally omits the part where she and Karen treated me like a monster for caring about Dad and disregarded him in his last months. With them, it's always someone else's fault. I've been doing okay in spite of their turmoil. The best choice I've ever made was to lease out the house. The space is truly loved and respected by the renters, a lovely family. I now have financial stability and can invest in my daughter's future thanks to the rental income. My spouse and I are doing well in our jobs, and we have begun preparing for a long overdue family getaway. Regarding Karen and Rachel, they have already made their decisions and are now dealing with the fallout. Rachel is trapped in a marriage that is about to end, while Karen continues to move between relatives. I simply don't care about them anymore. I don't mean any harm. The most liberating thing of all has been realizing that their turmoil is no longer my problem. I appreciate you reading and all of your help along the process, Reddit. Thank you for everything, and be careful. My parents gave me some money and kicked me out after my sister was born. 17 years later, they want my help. I am 35 years old and employed as a software developer at a large West Coast tech company. I finally established a secure existence for myself after working in the field for almost 10 years, complete with a respectable salary, a cozy apartment, and even some future investments. I undoubtedly appear to be living the American dream from the outside. However, something that happened recently has been making me face my history, and I'm finding it difficult to deal with. After 17 years of total quiet, my parents, 60 million and 58 million, reached out to me and asked for my assistance with my sister, 13 million. You must be aware of our past in order to comprehend the significance of this. My parents never wanted me as a youngster. Before I was born, they had been trying for a daughter for years, and they were openly disappointed to have me instead. As a child, I frequently heard parents call me the spare, or a remnant in conversations with friends or family. We weren't impoverished because my dad was a real estate agent and my mom taught high school, but they always pretended that my presence was depleting their finances. I can still clearly recall family get-togethers where family members would try to persuade my parents to be thankful for their healthy son. I learned to keep quiet during these conversations, but my parents would still say things like, "Unless it's a girl, we don't really have a child yet." My aunt would say things like, "At least he's smart and well-behaved," or, "Many couples can't have children at all." Their remarks still had a profound impact, especially during family gatherings or holidays. I began to develop a strong interest in computers and programming in middle school. Using whatever resources I could find online, I would spend hours training myself to code in the school computer lab. After noticing my enthusiasm, my computer science teacher began to mentor me and even allowed me to stay after school to work on projects. However, my parents would either nod absently or shift the conversation to their ongoing efforts to have another child whenever I tried to discuss my accomplishments with them. When I was 15, everything changed. My sister was my parents' miracle child, finally born after years of trying. It was like a switch flipping in our home when she was born. There was love, excitement, and celebration all at once, but none of it was aimed at me. They gave her everything, including their time, money, love, and attention. Although I recognized that she was their top priority, the disparity in their treatment of us was unpleasant and striking. I can still clearly recall my junior year victory in a state-level programming competition. A minor college scholarship was part of the award. My parents were so enamored with my sister's block stacking that they hardly looked up when I brought the trophy and certificate home. However, her accomplishment of stacking 3 blocks on top of one another was worthy of a cake and photo celebration with the family. I pushed myself into my academics and coding at school because I knew that education was the key to my freedom. I began working as a freelance web developer on the side, keeping the money I made hidden because I thought I might need it in the future. That intuition was correct. In retrospect, I believe my parents had been preparing this for some time since, rather than throwing a party for my 18th birthday, they sat me down for what they called an important discussion. They clarified that my sister's playroom and learning area required my room. They had already made the decision that I would go right away. They completely shut me down when I attempted to explain that I needed time to find a place and save money. They said I'd had time to get ready and should be able to handle things myself. My father gave me a $500 envelope containing what he referred to as startup money, and gave me until the weekend to depart. It happened on a Tuesday. I stuffed my laptop, some clothes, and the about $3,000 I had surreptitiously collected from my freelancing business into my old high school backpack and a few trash bags. As I packed, my sister, who was only 3 years old at the time, watched from the doorway, unable to comprehend what was going on. The initial years were harsh. While being cautious not to overstay my welcome anywhere, I couch-surfed between friends' homes. I worked a variety of jobs, including day labor at construction sites, nighttime shifts at 7-Eleven, and freelance coding whenever I could find customers. In between employment, I would spend the day sleeping at public libraries, utilizing their computers to learn new programming languages and search for better prospects. I survived on whatever was on offer at the dollar store and ramen noodles. I sometimes went to bed hungry because I wasn't sure if I would have enough money for my next meal. The worst time of year was in the winter, when I occasionally had to decide between having enough food to eat and paying for a warm place to sleep. I made an effort to stay in touch with my parents during those formative years in spite of everything. I would periodically give them a call in the hopes of seeing even the slightest indication that they were concerned about my welfare. However, they were obviously waiting for the conversation to end, and each exchange was brief and awkward. They never inquired about my needs or how I was doing. They just remarked, "That's nice," and shifted the conversation to my sister's preschool accomplishments when I told that I was enrolled in community college courses while working. I quit trying after being the only one who reached out for 2 years. Even after I taught myself full-stack coding, they never gave me a call to see how I was doing or left a message on my birthday or on holidays. I recall being so desperate to let them know that I had arrived, but their phone had already been cut off. I learned so much about survival and independence in those first several years after being expelled. I continued to code while working several jobs. I would use my phone to study programming documentation during my breaks at the convenience shop. I would work on minor freelance assignments at the public library in between building site shifts. With free Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and, most importantly, computers where I could practice coding, the library turned into my haven. When a small firm decided to hire me as a junior developer, I finally got my break. My freelance work portfolio and my contributions to open source projects impressed them. Although the pay wasn't high by IT standards, it changed my life. I was able to buy a little studio apartment for the first time and was no longer concerned about where I would sleep every night. I pushed myself into the task, working 70-hour weeks and learning as much as I could about cloud computing, database administration, and system architecture. Like a sponge, I took it all in. After my coworkers saw how committed I was, I quickly took charge of modest initiatives. I kept working on open source projects and creating my own apps on the weekends and at night. I had discovered something I genuinely liked doing, so it wasn't just about the money anymore. When one of the big IT corporations saw my contributions to their open source platform, it was the true turning point. They extended an invitation for an interview, and following 6 rounds of technical interviews, I was offered a job that fundamentally altered my life. After 7 years, I am now in charge of a large project team as a senior software engineer. I have enough cash to feel secure about the future, a modern apartment in a safe building, and a solid investment portfolio. Before my father's number showed up on my phone 3 days ago, after 17 years of total silence, I believed I had finally put an end to my past. It was startling to hear his voice. His voice seemed older, almost frantic. "It couldn't wait," he added. They had to discuss my sister. I was left reeling by the discourse that ensued. "It looks like my 13-year-old sister is having a lot of problems. She frequently skips school, has been caught shoplifting several times, and hangs out with a group of older teens whom my parents disapprove of. More concerningly, she has had multiple encounters with local police authorities and drugs have been discovered in her room twice. 3 different rehabilitation programs have already been tried on her, but none of them appear to have been successful. When my father mentioned their financial predicament, it became evident why they had called. More than $200,000 has been spent on counseling sessions, various treatment programs, and legal bills. They had sold the majority of their valuables, maxed out many credit cards, and remortgaged their home. They are in dire need of assistance and are now considering a $75,000 specialist long-term treatment center. With tears in her eyes, my mother called and said they had nowhere else to go. The phrase, "family needs to stick together," and the fact that I am their only chance to save my sister were repeated by her. I was struck by the irony of hearing these remarks from the same folks who expelled me when I was 18 and never looked back. When I was sleeping in my car in between couch surfing arrangements, where was this sense of family unity? On all those evenings when I went to bed hungry, where was it? In addition to aid with their credit card debt and mortgage payments, they are requesting support with the costs of the treatment program. They require over $100,000 in total. If I couldn't give the entire money right away, my father even recommended that we arrange a payment schedule. To be honest, if I wanted to, I could assist them. I have a secure financial situation thanks to years of frugal living and wise investing. However, I feel physically uncomfortable at the idea of granting them access to my finances. I acquired this money by working hard and making sacrifices for years, frequently going without food and housing while learning to code. I can't sleep at night because of how complicated this scenario is. Since my sister is only a child, I feel bad for even considering helping. She never requested to be born into this mess, and perhaps things would have turned out differently if someone had supported me when I was a teenager. However, I then recall how my parents handled me, how they dismissed me without question and never once inquired about my whereabouts for 17 years. They contacted again yesterday, requesting a face-to-face meeting. They claimed to want to make amends and provide an explanation for everything. They offered to drive the 4 hours to visit me and proposed that we meet at a fancy restaurant in my neighborhood. Their zeal unnerves me in some way, as if they're making an excessive effort to sway events to their advantage. According to my partner, 34F, I should set clear limits. She has personally witnessed the amount of effort I have put into rebuilding my life and getting over my childhood trauma. She fears that allowing my parents to return could reverse years of emotional growth. Although he thinks I owe my parents nothing, my best buddy, who let me sleep on his sofa during those difficult early years, advises me to think about assisting my sister directly if I so choose. I'm totally conflicted right now. My rational side tells me to keep the distance that has helped me succeed. My parents still view me as a resource to be utilized rather than a beloved son, thus they haven't changed. Their true motivations are evident from the way they are handling this matter, concentrating on the money rather than trying to make atonement for the past. However, my emotional side keeps thinking about my sister, a disturbed adolescent who may be misbehaving due to the same poisonous familial dynamics from which I fled. By refusing to assist, am I sustaining the abandoning cycle, or would aiding merely make my parents' manipulation possible? Those terrifying evenings spent sleeping in my car taught me to never take for granted the life I've worked so hard to create. I feel like I'm being pulled back into the craziness that I've been trying to avoid for years. Should I assist them and run the danger of being manipulated again? Do I make an effort to assist my sister directly? Or should I continue to set the boundaries that have helped me recover and grow? I'm sure I'll question any decision I choose. I might be angry with them for dragging me back in if I assist. I could always question whether I could have changed my sister's life if I didn't. This decision is weighing me down, and I could really use some outside insight. First update. I chose to meet my folks at a downtown coffee shop after reading your advice and comments. I reasoned that being in a public setting would help maintain decorum and provide me with a convenient way to leave if necessary. I was immediately struck by how much they had aged when I first saw them enter. In addition to having black circles under their eyes and a lot more gray hair than I could recall, they were worn out. They didn't take long to delve into specifics. It seems that my sister's problems are more serious than they first said over the phone. She has had to attend several rehabilitation programs, all of which they have had to pay for out of pocket, in addition to her substance abuse and legal issues. She hasn't gone to a full week of classes in months, so she's not just missing school periodically. She frequently slips out with individuals who are obviously a bad influence, frequently going missing for days at a time. My parents weren't lying to me about their financial circumstances. They showed me their phone records. To pay for these costs, they have sold the majority of their prized assets, including the house I grew up in. They are currently having financial difficulties and live in a tiny apartment. According to their estimates, they will only be able to survive for a few more months if they sell some family artifacts. I felt uneasy because of this underlying expectation that pervaded our talk. My duty as their son, to assist them, was one of the family obligations they constantly bringing up. They seem to assume that just because we are related, I would step up regardless of what they had done in the past. It was evident from the way they spoke that they hadn't really acknowledged their previous treatment or truly digested how they had wronged me. I could feel all of my previous hatred and rage rising as they continued. None of this was their fault, in their opinion. They dismissed my expulsion at the age of 18, claiming it was just parenting, and that they had acted in the best interests of the family, at the time. They behaved as though their treatment of me was entirely appropriate. They now expected me to overlook everything and intervene to solve their issues. I came to see that they were seeking a solution, not understanding or forgiveness. And my money was that solution to them. I was their final option because they needed someone to shoulder the financial load of all the choices they had made over the years. I listened to what they had to say before firmly telling them that I was unable to assist them. I clarified that when they abandoned me, I had put a lot of effort into starting a life on my own and that I was no longer in a position to help them, either morally or emotionally. I was clear that I didn't feel obligated to get them out of a situation that they had established for themselves. My refusal was not well received by them at all. Their tone altered entirely, and their expressions hardened. They accused me of being callous for not assisting my sister, branded me selfish, and claimed that I was leaving my family. Their eyes were filled with disappointment and rage, which I could see. It reminded me of my early years. Nothing had changed. They continued attempting to use guilt to make me feel as though I owed them money. I was more conflicted as I left that meeting than when I arrived. I feel somewhat relieved that I defended myself and established boundaries. However, another part of me feels bad, as if I'm abandoning them when they're at their lowest. It's difficult to describe, but it seems weird to leave them in this way even if I know they profoundly wounded me. I can't stop thinking about my sister, whom I don't even know, and their predicament. Although I'm sorry for her, I don't think I can help her. It hurts to know that even after all these years, my parents still only regard me as a tool to solve their problems rather than as a unique person with a life and challenges of my own. It's difficult for me to let go of the guilt. Is it wrong of me to persist with my choice? Should I have looked for a compromise? I can't stop reliving the encounter in my head, questioning whether I made the proper decision. Second update. Since my last post, which was only a week ago, things have gotten even more bizarre. Only a few hours earlier, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I heard my sister's voice for the first time when I responded. I was completely unprepared for this. I only have hazy memories of her from when she was a newborn, just before I moved out. The call got off to an unexpectedly good start. Considering what I had heard about her behavior, I was surprised to hear a courteous, almost pleasant voice. She started by requesting that I assist our parents with their present financial predicament. It was evident that she had practiced this pitch because she was making a big deal out of how they were having trouble and how I could save the family. I made an effort to respond politely but firmly, stating that I had to make the best choices for myself because of the complexity of my connection with our parents. Everything changed at that point. Her attitude changed abruptly. In a matter of seconds, she switched from being courteous to becoming enraged, accusing me of being self-centered and leaving her to handle our parents' problems. She had always been envious of her and insisted that I was abandoning my family. She said I was being arrogant since I had left and begun living on my own, whereas they had been my backers the entire time. I was stunned by what she said. They had a hauntingly familiar sound, as if she were repeating something she had heard countless times. She talked about my assistance with such arrogance, as though she really thought I had a duty to intervene and make everything right. I was so shocked that I was unable to react. I was being forced to make up for years of decisions I had nothing to do with by this person I had never dated. She hung up before I had a chance to comprehend her emotional outburst. I tried to make sense of everything as I sat there looking at my phone. What was the source of this animosity? Why did she believe I had left her? I required clarification. I was determined to find out what was happening, so I called my folks. I immediately questioned them whether they had been telling my sister that I had left them and her behind when they first picked up the phone. After a revealing silence, they eventually came clean. They had been giving my sister an entirely distorted explanation for my departure for years. They informed her that they had severed their relationship with her out of spite and that I couldn't bear to share their attention with a younger sibling. I was portrayed as a conceited older brother who left the family because I was envious of her. They had completely removed from their story the fact that they had made me feel alienated from the day she was born and expelled me as soon as I became 18. It was as if someone had taken my breath away. My sister has grown up thinking that I was the bad guy in this tale. Given that she had been fed misinformation about who I was and why I left, it's no wonder she felt as though I had abandoned her. She had been carefully kept in the dark about the fact that my parents had made me feel unwelcome from birth and had evicted me from the house. That realization caused me to hang up on them. Although it has just been a few hours since our previous talk, they haven't made another attempt to get in touch. I'm upset with my parents for misrepresenting me to my sister and giving her the impression that I abandoned her, but I'm also upset with my sister for snapping at me and demanding my assistance as though I owed it to her. It's difficult to get rid of this resentment, but I'm also experiencing a new form of guilt. I wish my parents had been honest with her about my reasons for leaving. Perhaps my relationship with my sister would have been different if they had. Although I might not have been able to provide financial support to my parents, I could have developed a relationship with my sister and perhaps helped her steer clear of some of these behavioral problems. Now, though, it seems impossible to repair the harm. Even whether I want to try is up in the air. My family returned in the worst conceivable way, just when I thought I was done with them forever, which makes the whole scenario tiring. It's not that easy for me, even if a lot of commenters have advised me to simply ban my parents and move on. Whatever you want to call me, this is still family, and I believe that I should at least be aware of what's happening. Even though I'm in no position to provide financial support for my family, I can't help but notice that this is the first time they've contacted me. Nevertheless, I can see that my sister is too engrossed in their version of events to see things any other way, and my parents are still attempting to control the situation to achieve their goals. I'm at a loss on what to do. I can't get rid of the sense that any decision I make will be the wrong one. I'm even more convinced that keeping my distance is the proper decision after the way they've misrepresented the reasons for my departure. I feel bad for my sister though. Her conduct and relationships are obviously being impacted by the skewed perspective of her family history that she was raised with. I wonder if this damage can be fixed or if it's best to leave it alone. Third update. Since my last update, which was a few months ago, I've had plenty of time to think things through and let things calm down. It's been quieter for me, to be honest, but only because I choose to avoid the mess my sister and parents had produced. I'm coming to realize that sometimes taking a step back and avoiding letting their drama take over my life is the greatest way to achieve serenity. My parents gave me another call about a month after I had last provided an update. I wanted to hear what they had to say, so even though I was dreading it, I picked up. They were even more desperate this time, and they accused me of being dishonest in order to get money from me. They described the dreadful situation, how they were in danger of losing everything, and how they wanted me to intervene and make things right. The guilt trip about family is supposed to stick together was their first attempt. When that failed, they resorted to threats, claiming that if I didn't assist them, they would ruin my life. They then claimed that I was their only hope, changing their strategy once more. To be honest, I felt disgusted. They continued to threaten me in spite of everything that had transpired, and they never once stopped to admit how poorly they had treated me. I refused to back down and reiterated that I was unable to provide them with financial support and that I was not responsible for solving their issues. I reminded them that I wasn't responsible for cleaning up the mess. They had made these decisions. Of course, that did not make them pleased. For the next month, they continued to phone, alternating between threats and guilt trips. They eventually stopped phoning. I assumed they had finally come to the conclusion that I would not give in. I didn't hear back from them for a month, and to be honest, I thought that might be it. However, I received another call around a week ago. I nearly didn't answer, but my curiosity won out. Things had only deteriorated. They informed me that they needed to file for bankruptcy. They were essentially starting over with nothing after selling nearly all they owned to pay off their debts. They then revealed even more shocking detail. My sister had moved in with one of her friends and had severed all ties with them. Even though she is just 13, she managed to move in with a friend's family, who my parents claim tolerates her misbehavior. They said it was best that my sister left them because they could no longer see themselves supporting her when I questioned why they didn't call the police. In a sense, they have also abandoned their second child. They initially attempted to place the blame on me. They claimed that none of this would have occurred if I had simply assisted them when they requested it. They said that everything went south because of me. Naturally, they were unable to acknowledge their own responsibility for their acts. I was furious. I bluntly told them that their actions and how they had treated me were to blame for everything that was happening to them. I brought up the topics of how they treated me like a second-class person in my own house, how they neglected me when I needed them, and how they expelled me when I reached 18. I informed them that they continued to try to place the responsibility on me while ignoring the fact that that had an impact on me. At that point, they began to retreat and eventually ceased making excuses. They expressed regret for everything they had done to me and offered an apology. They expressed to me their wish that they had acted differently. They seemed to be saying everything that needed to be said, But it was too late. In addition to the fact that they had ruined my sister's and my own lives, I couldn't simply ignore how they had treated me for years. They were now suffering the repercussions of their decision to push me away. I must admit that I felt sorry for them, but I also realized that I couldn't risk the life I had created for myself in an attempt to mend what was already damaged. I informed them that I needed to keep my distance and that I was unable to assist. Despite their displeasure, I stood by my choice. I was still upset with them for what they had done to me after I hung up. However, I felt sorry for them at the same time. It's too late now, but I wish they had taken the time to realize what they were doing incorrectly when they had the chance. I've come to terms with the fact that I can't save them, and I'm learning to accept that. I have no idea what the future holds for my sister or them. I just know that I won't let their errors disturb my tranquility. They can't drag me back into their mess. I've come too far. I have much more important things to worry about right now, but maybe in the future I'll try to get in touch with my sister once more to see if I can assist her get back on track. All I can do is hope she takes this lesson to heart and makes wiser decisions than our parents did. That's about it for me, then. I won't be checking in on my family for a very long time. Even though I'm aware that this isn't the best conclusion, I've come to terms with it. I sincerely appreciate all of your guidance and encouragement over this trip. It has enabled me to remain steadfast in my choices.